Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I'm glad you guys can join me wherever you are. Wow, that light is really hot. I'm going to have to back that light up after the show. Either way, I'm glad that you guys can join me for another episode. We are at Hump Day, trying to make it over the hump. I have to be honest with you, I'm suffering through a bit of jet lag. I'm trying to get Danny Haiphong on the show, and he said he may be able to join. We'll see. Oh, I got my coffee. Yeah, I got my coffee. That's what took that extra minute for me to get the coffee. When my ex-wife and I were traveling, we came across a hot water heater. And it's like you pour water into it and it heats water. That's all it does. And initially we were like, okay, that's an interesting device. And slowly but surely, we came to use that thing religiously. And when we got back to the States, the first thing we bought was one of the hot water heaters. It comes in handy. Coffee, soup, broth, you name it. Apple cider, whatever. That thing is fantastic. And it heats water up within maybe a minute at the most, even for a large container of water. It is great. It is great. And I know I'm wowing about a hot water heater, but whatever, I'll go with it. I hope you guys are doing okay this morning, though. I am awake. Like I said, suffering through a bit of jet lag. Now, Danny Haiphong just came back from China, if I remember correctly. And Danny, I asked him to come on the show. He said he was open to coming on the show. That's a win by itself, right? He says, look, man, I'm suffering through jet lag. 7:30 in the morning might be a little aggressive for me. We will see. I'm hoping that he ultimately joins us. I want to make another announcement before I start. Transparency is a bitch. Transparency is a bitch. What I mean by that is how you say something may not be interpreted in the way that you say it, or in the spirit that you say it in, if that makes sense. Like, people filter it through their lens. And last night, I pointed out when I was ending the show that I'm currently in Malaysia. And I pointed out that I'm currently in Malaysia because I needed to save money. And in the months of October, November, December, January, February, I was effectively burning through savings because, after the network went over. I am stable at this point. So me explaining that, I was explaining why I was in Malaysia. I wasn't explaining it as a money grab, if that makes sense. I was explaining to be just honest with the audience about what was going on and where I was and why I was where I was. It's not about a trip. It's not about touring. I've been to Malaysia before, so it's definitely not about touring. When I'm touring, I don't go to the same location. This was to cut expenses and to do so radically. I wasn't saying that to fleece the audience, because I don't believe in fleecing the audience. If you give because you like the content, God bless you. Your contributions help this content keep going. It helps the show keep going. But I hate even the ask, which is why I don't do it often like some shows. Like, I don't have a runner at the bottom saying give to this or give to that. You may hear me say you can contribute through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, et cetera, because that's just kind of what you have to do. Again, I'm not discouraging those things. Those things help magnificently to keep the content going and help keep the show going. This is why I hate it. I have to walk a line in this because I'm trying to communicate one thing, but I don't want to diminish the other thing that I'm trying to. I'm in Malaysia. I will be here for the next several months. You can always help contribute to the show, PayPal, Super Chat, Patreon, etc. That remains true. All of that stuff is helpful to keep the content going and keep the content moving. Me telling you I'm in Malaysia in order to cut expenses, it's not. a cash grab. That's my point. It's purely for just the reason of transparency of where I am. I'm stable. This is not like the first few months where the network closed up and it was kind of just fuckery, to put it mildly. Yeah, hopefully that is communicated in a way that I want. Like I said, it's hard to walk a line because you don't want to diminish or discourage people from contributing because it's necessary for the show. But I want them to contribute because they enjoy the show, they enjoy the conversation, they enjoy the content, they enjoy what's being said, they enjoy the host. Like, meaning I want them to contribute for issues pertaining to the show, not issues pertaining to anything else. So I appreciate all of you who felt some kind of way about the reason that I was here. I just want to thank all of you. I'll put it that way. I want to thank all of you. But I do want to nail that point home, that it's, if you give for the show, and give for the content, and give because you enjoy it, and give because something that somebody said either pissed you off or motivated you to give your own commentary. Those are the reasons, the rationale. The other stuff shouldn't affect anything else. There's a reason why I'm keeping the show at 7 a.m. because it's a morning show. And my dealing with economic stuff has nothing to do with the show. It's separate and distinct. And so even though it's a pain in the ass to do the show at 7 p.m. and then have to cut videos till 3 in the morning, it just is what it is. I'm the one that made the choice to do this. I'm the one that made bad decisions when I was in DC. I'm the one. It wasn't my fault that the network closed up, fair enough, but still. That being said, let's get to the news. Let's get to real stuff, stuff that matters. Interesting news that is out. Interesting news that is out. Now, if you remember, Mirs from Germany, the guy who looks like a Nazi, and probably his family members that were Nazis, like Annalena Baerbock, came out and effectively said he's giving Taurus missiles to Ukraine, and that the restrictions on those Taurus missiles being fired are removed. And that is true for Germany and the UK. And if I'm not mistaken, even pointed out that the West was effectively on board for that choice, meaning Donald Trump. Now, Trump has claimed that he is trying to come to some kind of choice on whether or not he wants to remove all the binary restrictions on targeting. Now, I showed the video yesterday where Putin was very clear. If you do that, you are directly involved in the war. And the reason you're directly involved in the war is very straightforward. Ukraine can't fire those missiles alone. And because Ukraine can't fire those missiles alone, that means your hands will be on the missiles as you fire those missiles. And you're firing those missiles into Russian territory, such as at Moscow or other cities in Russia. That is a red line. And as that's a red line, you will be targeted. He was very clear. He didn't stutter. He didn't back away from that. Nobody backed away from that. And to be very frank with you, it is impossible to back away from it. You are forced to that choice. There is no other choice. If I allow you to fire missiles at my cities and you get away with it without me responding, what does it mean? It means that I've given you license to fire more missiles at my cities. I cannot allow you to fire missiles at my cities. And because I cannot allow you to fire missiles at my cities, then you will need to be targeted with hell to pay. So whether it's Germany, whether it's France, whether it's London, if you want an arrest to come your way, F around and find out. That was his point. His point is right, by the way. This Ukraine has been getting hellish bombardment over the course of the last several days. Now, Russia says this is in retaliation for trying to murder Putin and assassinate Putin.
Oh.
This is Odessa.
Oh, gemi vuruyorlar.
Yeah. Is Germany prepared for that? Is Germany prepared for that? Is that what Germans want happening to their cities again? Is that what they really look for? I mean, keep in mind, the last war, Germany didn't fare all that well. The last war, France didn't fare all that well. France was taken over within a couple of days. I remember the phone call where the guy was like, "It's over." He's like, "What do you mean it's over?" Chocolat bell. The Germans have taken us over. Yeah, that was France in World War II. Not to mention, when Napoleon went into Russia or Moscow, again, he gets crushed, where he goes fleeing out of Moscow back to France, leaving his own military to be effectively crushed and destroyed. Meaning there's a history of these European capitals F-arounding and finding out. And for whatever particular reason, they never quite get the hint. And you have these other chicken hawks that are out there today, Macron, who gets beat by his wife, however, is willing to send real men into war. Okay. Again, this is an F around and find out. Ukraine was given, backed, or let's say provided with the largest military in Europe. What is happening to Ukraine right now? They're being taken apart. And for all this talk about Ukraine didn't follow what the West was saying, because what you were telling them was ridiculous. You didn't care about Ukrainian lives, and so you were willing to waste those Ukrainian lives over and over and over again. You are ill prepared for this sort of warfare, nor can you put the military or even have the military logistics in order to support any kind of real armed conflict against Russia. Now, it's very possible that they know that, and that part of the reason they keep saying what they're saying is purely to kill any sort of negotiations. The irony is, you don't even need to do that, because what Donald Trump has talked about in negotiations is utter nonsense. The notion that Russia is going to allow you to put American troops on Russian soil is absurd. You should have known that was absurd. But therein lies the rub. I don't think Trump is bright enough to know it. Here's some more strikes that were taking place on Ukraine. Just so you know what the modern battlefield looks like. This is not child's play. That is death from above. Are people in the UK ready for that? Are people in France ready for that? Are people in Germany ready for that? Are you really ready to put yourself in the line of fire? And I mean that literally. For unclear reasons, for a lot of propaganda and for a lot of lies, which is effectively what they've been feeding to their populations for the last several years. What's also more interesting for this is whether they go through with this. Now, Russia obviously knows where these missiles are being built. They obviously know where these missiles are being stored. And they have made the point very clear: we will target your factories. We will do it. We will hit you with an arresting missile. We will do it. Don't test us. And the question that is looming is, will Europe test that red line? Don't take my word for it. This is Putin talking about it a year ago. A year ago. If you remember, this was when the Joe Biden administration came out saying that they were going to allow missile strikes into Russia. Russia said, okay, however, be aware, if you do that, there are consequences. This is Putin himself, not Medvedev, not any other bomb slinger. This is Putin himself saying it.
Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их прямое участие. И это уже, конечно, существенным образом меняет саму суть, саму природу конфликта. Это будет означать, что страны НАТО, США, европейские страны воюют с Россией. А если это так, то, имея в виду изменение самой сути этого конфликта, мы будем принимать соответствующие решения, исходя из тех угроз, которые нам будут создаваться. Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. это их прямое участие. И это уже, конечно...
This was in relation to the U.S. doing it. Okay. What about other countries? So this was a Russian Duma member pointing out their response, effectively saying, look, we've been preparing for this. Like, meaning we understood. We were not in the dark. You all might be in the dark, meaning you might be doing this haphazardly, where you are just going from place to place, not knowing what the next step is going to be. That may be you. We play chess. We were prepared and was thinking about this in advance in regards to the limits, or let's say the lengths that you all were willing to go in regards to this conflict. We are prepared. This is what he made the point of saying right here. This is chairman of State Duma Defense Committee. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. Okay, I will. Andrei Kartopolov. And this is his point. This is the point that he's being made. And this is the exact point that I'm making. F around to find out. If you want to expand this war, this will be the exact way to do it.
Это означает то, что мы успешно выполняем задачи специальной военной операции, и на сегодня Украина реально...
Okay, that doesn't help me at all. For some reason, I thought the dialogue was at the bottom. I'll just read what he's saying here. In a nutshell, he points out, he says, according to the attempts to, quote, save Ukraine by allowing long-range attacks on Russia's calculated, quote, we have long counted on the possibility. We are ready for it. We have everything. He warned, so let them complain about themselves. First Ukraine, and then everyone else who makes such an idiotic decision will get it. We'll get it. I'll leave you to figure out what it is yada-yadaing over. Another member, I guess he's not a Duma member, but he's part of, let's say, Russian media. As he was talking about it, he went further, pointing out the German military bases, where they are, that are creating those missiles that they're talking about, and effectively saying, look, we will hit those sites. We know where they are. We hit using a Rezhnik, 1 or 2 missiles right here, this guy. So he points this out, which again should be terrifying to anybody that is listening or paying attention to what is happening right now.
Самое главное, что ВСУ не обладает необходимыми компетенциями по программированию полетного задания и боевому использованию этой ракетной системы. Я полагаю, что факт применения против России крылатых ракет «Таурус» означает вступление Германии в боевые действия против Российской Федерации. Следовательно, необходима показательная единичная акция возмездия. Завод-изготовитель крылатых ракет «Таурус» расположен в безлюдной местности, вдалеке от городской черты застройки. Поэтому, по нашей оценке, использование всего 2 баллистических ракет средней дальности «Орешник» — это 12 боевых блоков гиперзвуковых, без ядерного оснащения способны полностью уничтожить и сделать невозможным в течение ближайших 5 лет дальнейшее производство этих.
I hope you got what he said. He says, look, Ukraine is not capable. By the way, just be very clear. He said nothing different than what Putin said. Putin didn't use the term Oreshnik. Fair enough. But everything that he just said is effectively exactly what Putin said when Putin was talking. Ukraine can't do it by themselves. Because Ukraine can't do it by themselves, that means you directly are party to this war. If a Taurus missile, if a Storm Shadow, whatever the other hell missile, hits and attacks Russian cities, we will find those areas that created those things, hell, maybe even launch those things, and we would destroy those areas. And you can't do anything about it, short of, again, going to war. Now, the question for Europe is, would the United States get involved to protect Europe? That is the question, right? What if Donald Trump says, yeah, I don't want American missiles to be used for long-range use. So if you guys do that, you're on your own. Then what? If one of those bases in Germany gets hit, does the U.S. get involved? Now, keep in mind, this is exactly what Europe wants. This is exactly what they're hoping for. They want America as a quote unquote backstop, with the idea that any war that takes place, America would effectively fight the war on their behalf, or at the very least be deeply involved in the war. And by definition, they would have to be, because Europe is incompetent militarily and couldn't do it by themselves, which is the reason why they've been coming to the United States begging Donald Trump to be a backstop. The question ultimately that's looming is if indeed those Taurus missiles or Storm Shadow missiles fired at Russian cities are tripwire. Now, it has become very clear one of two things. Either Trump is lying, or Trump is not being told what is happening, meaning he's being maneuvered by the people around him. Both could be true. When Trump, after murdering all of those people in Gaza, came back and said, hey man, Putin has gone crazy because he killed 12 people out of like 300 and something missile strikes. Okay. You've blown up a building to kill more people, to get one guy. So don't give me this, virtue signaling nonsense. He's like, oh, Putin's gone crazy. I don't know what happened to Putin. Okay, this is insane, right? But then when the reporter did the follow-up, say, hey, Russia said that they had drone swarms that nearly took out President Putin. Trump says, I didn't know anything about that. I would wager to you that Trump also didn't know that Ukraine had sent like thousands of drones into civilian areas over the course of the last week. I would wager to you he didn't know that. Keep in mind, the people that Donald Trump has surrounded himself with don't want negotiations. They want an escalation of the war, or the very least, the continuation of the war. And so regardless of what Trump wants, I'm beginning to come to the conclusion that Trump is just as incompetent as I thought he was, that he is dumb as a box of rocks. And the only thing he knows is what people put into his mind, meaning he doesn't have competence of what is happening around him. He doesn't have an awareness of what's taking place on the battlefield or the conditions on the battlefield. He knows what people tell him. That's all he knows. He doesn't have this secondary foresight. Now, it's one thing if he has a sense of mind of, hey, I don't want to get into a larger war. That may or may not be true. He may not want a quote unquote larger war, but it doesn't mean he can't be maneuvered into one, especially if you're completely incompetent. I was watching, oh God, it was the woman from one of these financial organizations. And she was talking about the difference between talking to Trump and the difference between talking to Putin. And she pointed out Putin has no papers in front of him. He knows everything by heart. He's very competent. He knows exactly what the subject matter is. He is well versed on the subject matter. And you have to deal with him with that level of competence. She said, with Trump, you have to smile through it because effectively he doesn't know anything. So when he answers that reporter, say, I didn't hear that, he may be telling the truth. I didn't hear it. And I have no separate capability of coming to the information on my own, short of somebody just dumping it into me and telling me what to say like I'm a teleprompter. If that's true, oh, that's terrifying. That's terrifying. Trump put out another ridiculous tweet. This. And again, I don't know who he thinks he's fooling, but it's nobody in Russia. Vladimir Putin doesn't realize if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened in Russia. And I mean really bad, he's playing with fire. Dude, you are at war with Russia right now. You, Donald Trump, are at war with Russia right now. Putin doesn't depend on you as a good cop. Nobody in Russia cares about what you think. You may get Russian media being more open to you because they went through all the hostilities with Joe Biden. Nobody trusts you. Nobody believes in you. Nobody believes you have credibility. None of those things. You are just a factor to maneuver every bit as much as Europe and Zelensky considered you a factor to maneuver. That's it. That's it. So any of these mean tweets, nobody cares. Just being honest with you, nobody cares. They care in the sense of whether you will keep the war going and walk away. But whether you keep the war going and walk away has nothing to do with what Russia does. They pursue their objectives on the battlefield, fighting you, because you are the enemy combatant. You are the one that are dumping weapons, and you are the one that was dumping money into it. Europe is the one that's dumping money into it. You can't go with this idea that the U.S. has been murdering and killing Russians for the last 3 years and then turn around and say, well, now I'm a mediator. Who do you think you're fooling? Russia has gone through the Minsk Agreements 1 and 2. They've gone through the Istanbul Agreements. And in all of these cases, the U.S. and Europe lied. They openly lied. Hell, even the overthrow of the government of Ukraine, the legitimate government of Ukraine, where you put your people in, again, that was a U.S.-based action. Do you think that they're comically unaware of it in the way that you are comically unaware of what's going on around you? They are not. I don't know who these tweets are for. Now, there may be some cultists in MAGA who believe everything Donald Trump says. Canada is considering being the 51st state. And MAGA is like, wow, Donald Trump is going to get Canada. You have those people, fair enough. But those are people in your cult. And if you're only advertising the people in your cult, fair enough. But your opponents don't buy it in the least. Medvedev responds to this in his typical Medvedev. Again, I still believe Medvedev, his point of view, is the prevailing point of view. Putin may be the velvet glove. Medvedev is the honesty. Regarding Trump's words about Putin, quote, playing with fire, quote, really bad things happening to Russia. I only know of one really bad thing, World War III. I hope Donald Trump understands this. Again, fuck around, find out. That's what that tweet is. I think I can explain to any Russians watching this why America acts this way. And maybe even why Europeans act this way, but Europeans shouldn't act this way. But America, I kind of get because I live here. When Russia invaded Ukraine, and it was an invasion, they can call it whatever they want, special military operation, it was a fucking invasion. You may have reasons to do it. Meaning, if somebody is threatening me, yeah, I can punch you in the nose. I did hit you in the nose first, but you were threatening me. You were provoked. Agreed. But it was an invasion. When they invaded, many Americans didn't think they would. The government of the U.S. lies constantly, so there was no way to trust the U.S. government. And so what we were trusting was, there's no way he's going to do it. No, he's not going to invade Ukraine. Oh my God, he invaded Ukraine. And I had to kind of challenge my own assumptions on that. Like, how did we all get it so wrong? Yes, you can say that the U.S. government lies constantly. Fair enough. That's perfectly fine. I accept that. But whether the government lies or not, you can still come to an assessment of whether you think the person is going to, their actions, and why they would do those actions or why they won't do those actions. And what I realized was, from the American point of view, there is no enemy at our gates. Like, Canada is not going to invade the U.S. Mexico is not going to invade the U.S. The last person who invaded a country was Britain back in, 1812 or something? Whatever that year is, 1860 something. Ted Rall needs to be here to give me a history lesson on it. But I hope you get my point. You spend 200 years having no enemies at your gates. It becomes a normal thing for you to not kind of grasp what it's like for a country to have enemies at their gates. They have countries that have invaded from the West multiple times. The First World War, killing 10 million people? And the Second World War, killing 30 million Soviets? Hell, even the Napoleonic Wars, where Russia or Moscow was effectively burned, even though Napoleon was chased out on a rail and his military was destroyed. I hope you get my point. You're dealing with a country with a history that has been invaded by the West numerous times. And in those invasions, killing millions each time they've invaded. And you have a hostile military organization, NATO, that has been expanding closer and closer to the border, led by a country that has overthrown Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, knocked over governments in South America, knocked over Iran, meaning you are dealing with sociopaths. And you know you're dealing with sociopaths. You're not, shocked by any kind of propaganda like, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. You've seen them do it over the course of time. And it is a continuity within the context of the government that is now trying to get to your borders. And not just get to your borders, knocks over a government, a legitimate government on your border, feeds it with a bunch of Nazis and empower those Nazis with a massive military armament, the largest in Europe. That is what you're confronted with. We are not confronted with that. We're just not. And because we're not confronted with that, we didn't lose 20, 30 million people in the last war. I think we lost 180,000 in World War II. I hope you get my point. There is a radically different context that they're dealing with. And the point I'm trying to make is they're not fucking around. They've been killing and dying for the last 3 years. You have done this, and they know you've done this, and all of this is taking place on their border. There is nowhere else to go. It is on their border. So if you don't think from their point of view it is existential, you are grotesquely missing the plot. They are willing, just like we are, to do any and everything in their power to defend the integrity of their country. And if that means destroy Germany again, for France to be destroyed or taken over again, for Belgium to get hit again, they will do it. Unequivocally, they will do it. You only need to put yourself in the mindset. You've expanded to our border. We've done everything in our power to prevent and avoid a war. And even now, we've given you the terms that we need in order to end this, and you don't do it. You continue to give weapons, you continuously give money, and you continue to escalate. Any notion of pragmatism that you've taken as weakness. And now you're talking about firing missiles into our cities. Okay. That's where we are. We're at a potential radical escalation of this war, where for the first time since Hitler rolled into Russia, murdering every Russian, every Soviet that he could get his hands on, with the Ukrainians helping him, by the way, that Russia would target German cities, or at the very least, German factories that are making the missiles to be launched. If you notice, what he pointed out was a factory that is far away from a city center, because even now, despite the fact that Ukraine has been targeting civilians, and despite the fact that Ukraine will most likely use that missile to hit Moscow, they are still trying to spare civilian lives. They're better people than I am. I tell you that. They're better people than I am. Because under chess logic, I would have initially said, if you were giving them weapons and money, you are targets. Full stop. Meaning, if you're giving them weapons and money in order to target our cities, and they're using those to target our cities, and I know you're directly involved in pointing out targets, given intelligence in order to hit my cities, given intelligence in order to kill other Russians, and you provoked it. This is not like Israel and Gaza, where they are just murdering civilians in mass, putting them in the camps with this notion of ethnically cleansing the area and starving the population. It's not that. This is different. This is, you provoked the war. You brought this war to our border. We weren't expanding to your borders, you were expanding to ours. And now you're trying to act as if, oh my God, Russia is the aggressor. Okay, if you want to say that, fair enough. Let's be very clear though. You overthrew the government in 2014. You were murdering ethnic Russian Ukrainians. And even the US is speculated to have given the order to do that. So, don't give me this nonsense about, oh my God, we care about civilians, when you've been murdering civilians in Yemen, murdering civilians in Israel. And yes, back in Ukraine as it was murdering civilians in Donetsk. The larger question that's looming, is Germany going to F around and find out? Are they going to give that Taurus missile? Will that Taurus missile be fired into Moscow or some other Russian city? And if indeed Russia responds, which it has to do, just to be very clear, whether you fire a missile into Russia that is given to it by one of the European quizzling governments of the US, or whether you put troops in to Ukraine from one of these quizzling governments, these vassal states of the US, it is equal. And what I mean by equal is both is a nose under the camel's tent. You're prodding to see how far Russia would go, where they remain pragmatic as you remain sociopaths. But what they don't get And maybe they do. It forces action. If you put me in check, I have to move. If you take this piece, I have to take this piece back. If you put a missile system in space, I have to put a missile system in space because we need to maintain some level of strategic equality. Otherwise, you will have an advantage over me that I cannot necessarily allow. If you put troops in, I have to kill those troops. I have to. I don't have a choice. And I have to do it because I need to make the point that this is disallowed. This is not something that we will permit. And any troop that you put in, they will die. Belgium, UK, German, it doesn't matter. We will find those people, we will kill those people with, radical levels of intention. Because we have to kill those people. Because if we don't kill those people, then it gives license for you to add more people. So it started off as 1,000. Russia didn't do anything. Now it's 20. Now it's 30. Now you have a European contingent that is in Ukraine, something that Russia said that they weren't going to allow. It's a nose under the camel's tent. If you let a camel get its nose in the tent, the entire camel is coming into the tent. You wouldn't be able to stop it. I'm saying the same thing is true for the missile strikes. If you allow one, then you've allowed 10, in which case you have to respond to even the first one. They're giving fair warning to Germany. They're giving fair warning to the UK. They're giving fair warning to France. They're giving fair warning to Europe in general. The fact that Putin said it gives it the gravity that it should, or at the very least should give it the gravity that it demands. Will Europe heed it? Will Trump heed it? Also, Trump needs to stop this fence sitting nonsense. You can't have it both ways. You can't come out and say Putin is crazy in one sense and, I'm protecting Russia in the other sense. For one, you're not protecting Russia. You're giving it weapons. You're giving Ukraine weapons. And you're thinking about putting sanctions on. And you're thinking about lifting restrictions, which very possibly have already been lifted. Mears might have let the cat out the bag early because he pointed out that all of the West is effectively in alignment on the same policy. So will they do it is the question. Will Russia immediately respond? The answer, I think, has to be yes. Just forced. The move is forced. There's no way around the move. What would the U.S. do when Russia bombs a German factory? It's a fascinating question, right? Would the propaganda in Europe be sufficient to indicate this was unprovoked, which is what Europe would say? Russia has no right to bomb a German factory, which is what Europe would say. But is the population of mind of seeing their city being bombed again, do they blame the government for that? With this notion of, well, wait a minute, Maris has been out here saying that he's giving Taurus missiles. Russia said that was a red line. Now, keep in mind, in Europe, there's no First Amendment. And I can tell you, in Europe, they don't have access to certain media outlets. Like, they curb certain media outlets. In fact, if you remember recently, when I was talking to Kit Kleinberg about this yesterday, they outlawed 2 representatives of 2 journalists claiming that they were, quote, spreading Russian propaganda. That's fantastic. Those terms have only become relative. You're saying something we don't like. And because you're saying something we don't like, we're going to call it propaganda. They do the same trick here, by the way. Fair enough. But let's say that they were spreading Russian propaganda. Let's take the fullest potential of that term and say that it was literally true. The notion that you are banning journalists from the continent of Europe is astonishing. There was no court case. This was purely a bureaucratic choice to prevent 2 journalists from coming back into Europe and debanking those people, meaning taking away their bank accounts so they effectively don't have money to use. If you remember, we used to have a guest on, Karine Knies, and I have to say it that way because she corrected me when I got it wrong. They did something similar to her. And she was a diplomat. My point is, this notion of real data and real information going into Europe, they don't have a First Amendment. They don't have this notion of honesty in media. None of those things are necessarily true. Is it possible that some of that data filters through? Yes, that is possible. But brainwashing en masse is the norm. I've been to Europe. I know. I've spoken to Europeans. I've had these conversations. And they would say just robotic stuff over and over again without having any real context to what they are talking about, or even knowing the details of what they're talking about. But they would say it and repeat it robotically. And so, but the self-interest start to come into play. When it becomes very clear, wait a minute, we're about to go into a fight with the Russians. Do we want to do that? Why are we doing that? Does that thought start to filter in? Even against the propaganda itself, does reality start to assert itself that you are once again engaging in a war on the European continent with a force that has beat the shit out of you last time, and what happened to you last time, that you lost that war? Are they going to confront that? Or are they going to, let's rearm and let's now fight the Russians? Hey, let's don on snazzy uniforms while we do it. Let's get back to our historical roots. Is it going to be that? It's going to be that. Is London ready to do it? Are they ready to do it? That's a damning question, right? Regardless of the propaganda, are you ready to fight a war with the Russians? And after seeing what happened to Ukraine, do you really think your militaries and your industries are up to snuff to do so? I will tell you, from my point of view, if this war is going to happen, from Russia's point of view, they need to get this shit done. And I don't say that lightly, but I say it in the sense that they are continuously pushing and pushing and pushing. Now, one sense of that is, okay, they're pushing because they want Russia to respond. That may be true, right? The other sense is we're feeding Ukraine to Russia in order to give ourselves time to build up a military so within 10 years, we can actually go to war. Now, again, there are problems with that. The European economies are bankrupt. They've given all of this money, all of their weapons and everything else to Ukraine. They've been deindustrializing themselves, whereas the Russian economy has actually been booming relative to theirs. Will the population support that? Now, some people would say that the European populations are a captive audience. Maybe. If they're indeed a captive audience, why do you need to criminalize Marie Le Pen? Or why do you need to criminalize the AfD? Or why do you need to go to such lengths in order to try to get rid of Carolin Gorgescu in Romania, meaning killing that election? That doesn't indicate to me that these guys are a captive audience. That indicates to me that you have to effectively take the mask off and take heavy-handed action in order to prevent actual democracy from taking place in various European capitals, be it Romania, or for that matter, France, or for that matter, the AfD in Germany. And if indeed Le Pen's party, National Rally, AfD in Germany, takes it, then those are the two major forces in Europe. And if they do this notion of a military buildup with the idea of fighting the Russians, is it possible that the pressure on the political space gets to the point that it overwhelms the bureaucracy in the EU? That is a fascinating question to me, meaning for all of their plans and machinations about we'll feed Ukraine to the Russians and we'll keep this war going for as long as it takes in order to build up our militaries, and then we'll be ready to fight the Russians ourselves. Politically, the instability in those countries may disallow that plan from coming to fruition. So it's very possible that Russia just needs to hold pat and try to keep a certain level of stability without ending up in a larger war with the idea that those countries are going to collapse. I don't know, man. It's a tough one, right? It's a tough one. I don't know. It is hard to gauge that. You are trying to predict what happens in 5 years. In 5 years, 10 years. And in the context of that prediction, trying to decide what your moves are. Hell, this doesn't even get to America. What happens in 4 years if Trump stinks it up so much that any rando Democrat comes in? And I can tell you, these flag wavers that are on Twitter, social media, these are just cultists on the Democratic side who reflexively, oh, we should pray for Ukraine while helping Ukraine continue to fight in a war that's losing. Talk about a complete contradiction in terms. This is Kellogg, one of the people that is giving Trump information, or at the very least, let's put information in quotes. Kellogg comes out and says this: we got a list of conditions for peace agreement from Kiev. If we need them from Moscow, it's necessary to put pressure on Russia to force them to negotiate. Special Representative for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg. Kellogg is out to fucking lunch. Russia gave you its terms of surrender. It already gave you its terms of surrender. No NATO expansion, no troops in Ukraine, no more intelligence to Ukraine, denazification. And honestly, the things that Lavrov and some of the Russians are saying now at this point, they don't believe that these negotiations are going anywhere. And it seems as if what they want is unconditional surrender, which is, again, what Medvedev pointed out, and which is, I keep pointing out, that Medvedev is the honest point of view. I know people think he's a bomb thrower. And I know people think that, oh, Medvedev is, he's being bombastic. He's being honest. What would you think in this situation? I put to you that what he is saying is probably the actual Russian point of view, whereas what Putin is saying is the diplomatic velvet glove over that point of view. I strongly think that. I could be wrong, but I strongly think that. Let's go to another story. What time is it? Okay, we have time, 15 minutes. So we talked about Russia. All right. As I mentioned about Gaza, there is no division between Trump and Israel or Netanyahu or U.S. and Israel. Zero. The media keeps reporting it as if these tense conversations are taking place over Iran, or there's some kind of division, and they're nonsense. I would believe there's a vision when the U.S. stops weapons. I would believe that there's a vision when the U.S. stops giving money, aid, political support. But the idea that the U.S. cares about Gaza, but a week ago was at the ICJ arguing that it is perfectly okay to starve 2.2 million people, seems nonsensical to me. It just does. The idea that there's some kind of division between Israel and the U.S. when Steve Witkoff goes to Hamas, makes the deal, Israel blows off the deal, saying, no, we're not abiding by that deal. And Witkoff turns around and blames Hamas. I hope you get my point. It's nonsense. If your default position is regardless of what happens, you're going to defend and support Israel, then there is no division between Israel and the United States. Impossible. One of the things that Israel and the U.S. together have decided upon is to create concentration camps, to force march starving people into concentration camps, effectively led by their starvation. Now, the fact that starvation was planned and utilized in this way is, I guess, shown by the fact that they were creating food distribution hubs with the notion that we're going to get starving people to come to the food distribution hub. So if we don't give them food long enough, they'll get hungry. And they'll be forced by their own infirmities, by their own needs, in order to come to our warehouses for a humiliating process of food distribution. And we have the luxury of making money off of it, shekels, because we can serve them food that we ourselves make. So we can make money off of their starvation also. Now, this is, and this has happened before, by the way, where they've shot at hungry people. And you can imagine that if people are hungry and they rush an area of food, that they're rushing in the area of food because you starve them and they're hungry. So American mercenaries open fire on starving people. That's the story. American mercenaries open fire on starving people. This is the clip for it. I hate the fact that we have these clips. By the same token, it is necessary that these clips get aired. Where the hell is that clip? 1 second. Come on. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Just had the thing up. I just had that clip up. 1 second, guys. The last time this happened, it was a food truck, if I'm not mistaken. This time, we have decided, I just had the thing up. I must have gotten rid of the clip by accident. Anyway, the last time this happened, we effectively went after or let's say in that case, it was Israelis that went after all of these people who were effectively starving and claimed that, well, they attacked us. It's like, well, no, you weren't attacked. You starved people. Those people were hungry. You put out food, and those starving people ran to the food distribution truck, and you shot at them as they were running to the food distribution truck, and then claimed that they were effectively attacking the truck, and that you really didn't hit anybody when you did this. I mean, this is grotesque. This is, God bless Patrick Henderson, evidence of the concentration camps that they're effectively opening. What they've opened, I'll say. These are people in pens. Yeah, these are camps. I don't know what else you call it. These are camps. Concentration camps. They may not want to use that term. I don't know what other term you're going to use. You force march starving people into camps. That's what you've done. This is happening under the Trump administration. Would it have happened under the Biden administration? Probably, yeah. So, it's not like there's this great divide between these administrations. Joe Biden might not have been deporting people out of the country. Fair enough. But at any point, did Joe Biden push back on anything that Netanyahu wanted? Well, the answer is obviously no. And if indeed there was no pushback on anything that Netanyahu wanted, and he came to the conclusion that we want to ethnically cleanse the area, what would Joe Biden have said? Right? I'm trying to find that clip of the American mercenaries firing on people who were raiding the food bank. Because what they've done was, if you remember, the food program, or let's say the people who typically run the food program, backed out of it, saying this is unworkable. There's no way this is going to work. It is a humiliating process that you're effectively using to dehumanize people. And so they backed out. We decided we can make money off of this. And we decided to put our own mercenaries in to help with it. Maybe it is the same video. Maybe I'm getting this wrong. Maybe it is the same video. Wait a minute. Let me make sure. No, it's a different video. I will find that video. It's just disgusting, right? And the same guy who's doing that is the same one who's moralizing about 13 people being killed in a Russian airstrike. How do you do that? How do you do that with a straight face? And yet, Trump does it with a straight face. It's grotesque. It's disgusting. It's what our government is literally paying for. So this is not a situation of, this is just the Israeli government doing this. No. Here we are. Found the clip. All right. This is, shout out to DD Geopolitics. They are fantastic. As always, doing God's work. People in pens, starving people being shot at.
محمد فارمانا طول شخير الله يسخطه الله الله يطلب الحق سوى الشعب محمد فارمانا
What you're hearing is gunfire. It is very hard. That could have been any of us. Do you remember Peterson, his first name is Jordan Peterson, was in this conversation with this kid. And Peterson, it's like an interview format where they're like looking at each other eye to eye and they're asking each other questions. Sam Cedar actually did a damn good job when he was doing this. But again, as I keep pointing out to people, don't run up on Sam Cedar on the fly. He is a hell of a debater. I've watched hours of him debate libertarians and eat one after another alive, just out the blue. Like it wasn't even like he prepared for it. He's just on the show doing the thing. He's been doing this for so long. Do not run up on Sam Cedar on the fly. I've seen him dismantle people. Jordan Peterson is different. And what the kid said to Jordan Peterson got into this kind of weird line of logic where the kid pointed out, so you wouldn't lie for anything? He was like, nope, I wouldn't lie. I'll stand on it. And he was like, oh, you know, you need to be able to live and die for the things that you believe in. And he says, so you wouldn't lie if it was safe for family or something like that? He says, well, I wouldn't even be in that situation. And it's like, if you were born in Gaza, you would be in that situation. Your place of birth is a quirk, full quirk. You, as an identity, could have been born anywhere. And the idea that your point of view is, well, I wouldn't be in that situation, so I don't really need to answer that question. Nonsense. Nonsense. It's a quirk of birth. We decided to get rid of the actual food program that was distributing aid, to use it. And I'm saying we, US and Israel together, the US and Israel work in tandem in this plan. That's why they're US mercenaries that are firing at starving people who are trying to get food. We decided, let's starve the population. We decided, let's use their starvation in order to compel behavior. We decided, let's put them in pens. Let's put them in camps, concentration camps. Let's concentrate them in camps. You mean concentration camps? No, we don't want to use that word. We just want to concentrate them in camps. And after we concentrate them in camps, then we have more control. A, we can take Gaza. B, we have more control over the population. And so if we need to ethnically cleanse them and get them out, we have a much better chance of doing that because we've now controlled the population and put them in camps. We decided. We've given them 80 to 70% of the money to do it, if not more. We've given them all the bombs in order to kill people to make it happen. We've blown up hospitals, UN buildings. We just burned kids alive in school. I'm saying we because we paid for it. So we have decided to destroy all of Gaza with the notion that if we destroy everything, there's nothing for anybody to go back to. This was the plan from all along. This is why when all of these people kept saying, well, we need a two-state solution, it's like, okay, these people aren't being serious. But these people would say, well, we don't know what Netanyahu is doing. You could say that in the beginning, but in about 7-8 months, it was clear what was taking place at the point where you're blowing up hospitals. Well, of course you will blow up a hospital if you don't want people to go to the hospital. Meaning if you don't want sick people to be able to go to somewhere for safety and to get medical care because you want those people to leave, then you blow up the hospital. Same thing with the school, same thing with the UN building, same thing with the food distribution centers, same thing with picking a random place. Same thing. If you want people to go away, you destroy anything that would allow any sort of civilization in those places. So yeah, you destroy apartment buildings, you destroy houses, you destroy hotels. You blow up a building in order to get one guy, even though you kill 100 people in that building. You do it, you do it, you do it. If you want to blow up tanks, hey, you hate these people anyway, so what does it matter if you blow up tents and living compounds that you told them was going to be a safe passage? You hate these people anyway. It doesn't matter. People need to wrap their head around this Nazi logic that they're functioning with. They keep acting as if, oh, we're just going after Hamas. Again, I don't know anybody at this point, even people who defended Israel in the very beginning. People like Piers Morgan, for God's sake, have come to the conclusion, okay, this is excessive. No shit, Sherlock. It was excessive 6-7 months ago, 8 months ago, 2 months after it started. It was already excessive. My point is, we're doing that. That's us. We're paying for that. That's us. This is Donald Trump's war at this point. Oh, Dimitri is here. Dimitri, welcome to the show, man. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were here. I didn't even look up.
Hey, listen, I was really enjoying what you were saying, so there's no worries. If you want to continue, I'm happy to sit back and wait until you're done. Because
no, I'm sorry.
What you're saying is very, so important and so true.
It angers me. Like I was showing people this video. There are two videos. One, okay, I guess it requires a little bit of explanation. We've got rid of their food programs. So all of these people who are on the ground distributing food Those people are gone. They're no longer there. And so what they decided was to set up pens and basically concentration camps, places that look like this. I mean, keep in mind, these people are in the middle of the desert. And they're using starvation in order to get these people to come here. These are camps. And these are American mercenaries. And this guy thinks it's funny. I don't know what he's doing, putting up a love sign. But this is some Nazi shit. And to make it even worse, you go to this clip where now they're firing on people who are starving.
محمد فارمانا الله يسهطك
And if it didn't get even more sinister, what Israel has decided to do is we can make a profit off of starving people. So the food that we'll distribute will come from Israel. You can see Hebrew names on some of the boxes of aid that are being supplied, with people going through this humiliating process to just get food. It's disgusting. And we are paying for it. We're paying for it. Give me a take on that. I didn't bring you on for this one, but give me a take on it.
This was preceded, this horror show that you just showed us, by the resignation of the head of this so-called humanitarian organization.
Yes.
Who said, it's quite interesting because one would have thought that the genocidal entity would do a better job of choosing somebody better in the sense that they, the person would be compliant, would, do Israel's bidding. That's typically what Israel does in these situations. But somehow, it's just a level, we often talk about the evil of this regime, as we obviously should, but also the stunning level of incompetence. This person turned out to have apparently a conscience.
Yeah.
And said, I can't do this job consistently with basic, principles of independence and humanity and so forth, basic principles of the delivery of humanitarian aid, and resign. And of course, undeterred, the genocidal entity continued with its scheme. And as you saw, it basically evolved into a debacle yesterday, as I understand, because the people, after being made to wait in the blazing sun, these starving Palestinians, certainly hundreds if not thousands of them, herded like cattle. My God, in the blazing sun, it's hot in Palestine this time of year. Yeah. They understandably lost their patience. It doesn't appear, there's no evidence whatsoever that they were armed, but they lost their patience and they broke out of this, cattle, whatever you want to call it. And I've read reports that these mercenaries, apparently not the toughest of mercenaries, fled the scene. And so at that point, it was essentially chaos, and Israel, its military, did what it always does. It started firing on civilians, or at least in their general vicinity. I just, every day something happens, Jamal, that causes me to be even more shocked than the day before about the willingness of Western governments to tolerate what we're seeing. I can't believe it. I mean, Canada, France, and the UK, as I've been reporting on my channel for a week relentlessly, said on May 19th that if Israel doesn't deliver sufficient humanitarian aid to the Palestinians and stop settlement expansion, we are going to impose targeted sanctions and concrete actions on Israel. It would take us hours to recount all the atrocities that Israel has committed just since then. For example, massacring 9 out of 10 children of a Palestinian doctor, bombing a school, killing 36 people sheltering there, burning children alive. I could go on and on. I know you know how horrible it's been. What have they done? Nothing. They've done nothing. The most significant thing that any of those 3 governments did was Keir Starmer, David Lammy, as George Galloway likes to call him, Britain's Idi Amin, stood up in Parliament and with a lot of drama said, we're suspending trade talks with Israel. Well, Israel issued a statement, its foreign ministry, immediately after that, just basically heaping scorn on the so-called punishment that the UK had inflicted, saying actually this government wasn't even in trade talks with us. So,
Right.
you know, we're just going to continue doing what we're doing. They just declared it right out. So what are they waiting for, Jamal? What are they waiting for? How many people? Do they need 1 million dead? Do they need 1.5 million dead? Is there a number at which they will actually use this formidable sanctions power that they've been deploying against other states that have done far less than Israel? Or is there no number? I'm starting to think there's no number. I'm starting to think these people have an unlimited tolerance for Israel's depravity.
Dimitri, I didn't believe a word that was coming out of Europe on this. I didn't believe a word of it. From my point of view, they were doing this purely in order to create. Oh, 1 second. From my point of view, they were doing this purely to create separation between Israel while Israel goes through with the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, or while Israel goes through its strikes against Iran. I didn't take for one moment anything that was coming out of Europe to be honest or legit. I just didn't. I've watched this for what, nearly 2 years? And we've watched depravity every day for that 2 years. And at no point did Europe say anything. And my thing was like, okay, so why are they talking now? Meaning, I suspect that Europe is in on some plan that the US and Israel has cooked up. And in the same way that all of the stuff about Trump and Netanyahu are at odds over Iran, you have these European governments who want to say, well, we didn't have anything to do with that. 2 minutes ago, we said that we didn't like the fact that they were starving people. And the buzzword is always a two-state solution, which tells me they're not being serious. So, no, and make your point clear. Like, we watched them literally burning kids alive. I mean, like again, this is some stuff that the Nazis would have been like, wow, that's pretty impressive. That's a little girl who's trying to get out to school where her classmates were burned alive. From my understanding, she made it out alive. Who knows the damage that she's encountered in that. And then they're going to put out these articles about Israelis suffering PTSD. What the fuck do I care? I don't care. It's like, oh, a Nazi stumped his toe. Okay, fair enough. I guess my thing is, why do you think the European capitals are putting this out from your point of view? Like, if it's not, look, like I told you, there's nothing in me believe that they care. From their point of view, Israel is their colony, every bit as much as colonies in Africa, every bit as much as, Burkina Faso or the Congo or any of these other places where European colonies, that's their colony. White European atheists started it. And many Europeans and Americans have now gone to Israel in order to occupy land that belonged to Palestinians. And so from Europe's point of view, we like the fact that we have what we consider to be an ally in the middle of the Middle East. We don't want to change that fact. We accept that there's going to be settler colonialism stuff, just like it was in America, where we got rid of the Native Americans, put them in pens, put them in reservations. They understand the process because they did the process themselves, either in America or, for that matter, in Africa. So I just look at it as this is image management, not reality. For one, give me your take on that. And two, if I'm right, why do you think they're coming up now saying, hey, even though you've been starving for over a year, we think the starvation now is too bad, too much?
It's completely image management. It's so obvious that it's image management. I'm sick and tired of reading reports about being on the verge of a ceasefire agreement, and Donald Trump is putting pressure on Netanyahu. We saw all this bullshit under the Biden administration, and it led nowhere. They're continuing the same damn kabuki theater. They're all wringing their hands and saying Israel's a sovereign state, and man, sometimes it has to use unsavory tactics, but it lives in a really tough neighborhood, and all these bad actors want to wipe it out. So even though we don't like it, we have a fundamental obligation to protect this sanctuary for the Jewish people, which is exactly what it wasn't ever intended to be. It was intended to be the Anglo-American era empire's unsinkable aircraft carrier. That's what it was intended to be. And I believe that they want Israel to complete the genocide.
Yeah,
European governments, Canadian government, America. What other conclusion can you draw, Jamal? They keep pumping weapons into this entity, no matter what it does. No matter what they could shoot, they could shoot dead a 14-year-old American Palestinian child, no problem. Massacre a bunch of ambulance workers, World Central Kitchen workers, no problem. Burn children alive, no problem. Fire on diplomats in the West Bank, no problem. We give you authority to do whatever you need to do, and the worst you're going to have to confront from us is a little, rhetorical criticism. Now, why are they doing this? They're doing this now. In West Asia, they've always been depraved and genocidal in West Asia, although never to this level and never this obvious in my lifetime, at any rate. Why is it going to this extreme now? It's because they feel power slipping away from their fingers globally. Their power is in decline in Asia. Their power is in decline in Eastern Europe. Their power is in decline in Africa. And as American military planners said, after the Second World War, this is this region, because of its location geographically as the nexus between Africa, Asia, and Europe, and the massive amount of fossil fuel resources upon which the global economy depends for functioning. It is a source of stupendous strategic power. That's what American military planners said, and they said it was the greatest material prize in human history. The elites in the West understand that if they lose control of this, it's over. It's over for Western hegemony. They are going to become no better than, one power seated at the table, or perhaps even a junior partner in terms of the determination of global affairs. And they just can't stomach that. They can't stomach not being the dominant power of the world as they have been for, 500-600 years. So they're prepared at this stage to do anything, whatever it takes to maintain their grip on power. And I think they're convinced that this region is the last gasp event. They can't let it go, so they have to destroy any and all resistance to Western hegemony. And they're prepared to do whatever it takes.
Oh, that's such a good point. And that diverts me into a different area because I think it's a really good point. I've what is it called? The Elysian Gap. I think it's called the Elysian Gap. I always get the word wrong. But effectively, when there's a rising power versus a let's say a established power, that it creates friction, and that friction eventually sparks war. And for the longest time, I thought this was dealing with individual countries, but you pointed out the West as a whole. And, I was having this conversation where I was asking Karin Kanaiser to come on to the show, and she asked me why. And I was like, why is Europe acting this way? Like, they are destroying their own elections. They're obviously losing the war in Ukraine, and yet they keep doubling down on it. They're destroying their own communities. Any notion of this, quote, liberal order has effectively been collapsing under the bureaucracy of the EU. And in many respects, especially under the Biden administration, Biden was pushing them to do it. It's like, hey, I know you guys rely on that cheap gas, but we need you to get rid of it. Okay. Then their economies would tank, and they would somehow blame Russia, say Russia's using energy war. It's like, you passed sanctions. What do you mean we're using energy warfare? I guess my point is, I think you're answering the question for me. This gap is not between, let's say, the US and China, even though it might be on some level. It's between the West versus the rising powers of, let's say, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, the BRICS nations, meaning it's between the West, which is 14% of the globe, versus the rest of the globe. And they feel that power edging away, even in an economic sense and a military sense, with Russia just beating the hell out of Ukraine, despite all of NATO putting their weapons and money into it. Is that the way you see it? Like, give me your take on it. I know this is blowing things out to larger geopolitical contexts, but I am curious on your take, because that seems to be where the crisis point is happening. And in your point, Gaza might be one of the focal points of that, of the Middle East.
Yeah, I view Gaza as the front line in a war between Western elites and the rest of the world. One place, I'm sure you would agree with me, Jamal, that I don't think you mentioned in that summary was Africa. There are, whatever you may think of them, people who are not willing to be vassals of the United States rising to power in Africa, the most notable example being Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso. But he's not alone. He's just perhaps the most prominent of the actors. So even in Africa, which they've completely and utterly ravaged and devastated in the most disgusting way for centuries, you now see a rise of true anti-colonial fervor and independence, and this horrifies them. And so I think that at the end of the day, they're going to lose this battle. Their power is in terminal decline. The challenge we confront, people of conscience living in the West and the non-Western world, is how do we manage their decline without all of humanity being wiped out, because they have the capacity, as we can see, as we all know, to destroy the conditions for civilized life on Earth. And evidently, they're willing to do it. And nothing horrifies me more, in fact, than the idea that Israel, this insane, genocidal, psychopathic state, has enough nuclear weapons reportedly to actually cause a nuclear winter, which could kill up to billions of people, plunging the global food system into catastrophic decline. That should scare the hell out of people. But at the end of the day, that's the challenge we confront. How do we manage their decline without destroying all of humanity? Because it's happening, and they're going to do whatever it takes to stop it.
You bring up another interesting point. Somebody said, it's great to hear an interview where the person actually listens to the person who's being interviewed and responding to it. I read my comments. That's why. You're a lawyer, and I've spoken to many lawyers, especially those who are dealing with issues of human rights. And I always tell them I am not a believer that there is a such thing as international law. However, I do think that they're right that having a template for it is positive, something to compare reality to. Why hasn't Israel's nukes been brought up in the UN? Like, meaning, there's always this talk about, oh my God, we can't let Iran get a nuclear weapon. Whatever, Iran is a sovereign state. But no one, or very rarely, I've only heard it maybe once, where somebody brought up, okay, we would accept review of our nukes if Israel put theirs on the table and also have their program up for review. Nobody does that, though.
Yeah, I mean, because the moment you look at how Israel behaves, right? The moment there is an acknowledgement from Western elites that Israel has nukes, that conversation ain't going to go well. There's absolutely no there's no way that they can convince humanity that it should feel comfortable with Israel's possession of nuclear weapons. Okay, so the only way
everybody knows. Everybody already knows.
That's the absurdity of it, Jamal. That everybody knows, and we all know. Even the Israeli press talks about it. But they will not even acknowledge the existence of those nukes, because that is a conversation that will end badly no matter what. It's such a horrifying prospect. So all they can do is just make it taboo. And the corporate media are more than happy to accommodate them. When's the last time you heard somebody, it's the most obvious question in the world in the context of the discussions about Iran's supposed nuclear program. I mean, the claim that it wants a nuclear weapon. The most obvious question, journalistically speaking and legally speaking, is, well, what about Israel's nukes, right? Have you ever heard anybody from
right there?
One person, Jamal, from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, the BBC, Le Monde, go on and on, ever asked that question? The most obvious question. There's a conspiracy of silence between the corporate media and the political elites of the West to avoid this subject like the plague, because the moment they acknowledge, there will be immense pressure on them to dismantle Israel's nuclear arsenal, which there should be. It is the greatest threat confronting humanity today, in my opinion. Greater than the climate crisis, greater than anybody else's nuclear arsenal. These are the people, given what they've done over the last 18 months, I think any reasonable person would say they're the ones who are least to be trusted with these weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, they're religious maniacs. I mean, if you listen to some of the speeches that are coming out of Israel and some of the things they're saying, this stuff is messianic, like in the way that they're talking about this stuff. I mean, even the Samson option, where, it's better for us to kill our own, not Samson option, Hannibal directive, where it's better to kill our own as opposed to having people captured. That stuff is insane. And what freaks me out and annoys me greatly, by the way, is the way Western media talks about this kind of back and forth between Israel and the US. This is the New York Times. And there's a guy who's on social media who at times annoys the hell out of me because he repeats whatever is in the paper without analyzing what's in the paper, meaning he just says, hey, the New York Times says this, without really critically looking at, okay, well, whether this is true or whether this is false or whether this even makes sense. So as Trump seeks Iran deal, Israel again raises possible strikes on nuclear sites. Now, I've told the audience, I don't know what's in Trump's mind. I just don't. And because I don't know what's in Trump's mind, I don't know the direction this goes. Meaning, when Donald Trump is effectively saying he wants a Samson option, basically he wants them to dismantle their nuclear enrichment facilities. And Iran's like, no. They said from the beginning, nope, we're not doing it. It's not on the table for discussion. This ain't happening. And the U.S. still says, well, that's what we need you to do. Okay, well, now you have an impasse. Iran is not budging on that. This is national sovereignty. They shouldn't even be having this conversation in the first place, but whatever, they want to get rid of sanctions, so I get it. And so the catch becomes, okay, well, what does the U.S. do? Trump has said, I need this deal to be done in 2 months. And I may bomb you. And he spent months saying, I don't want to bomb Iran. They're nice people, but God knows I would do it. I will bomb them if I have to. I'll bomb them if I have to. And so he spent months with this negotiating tactic of, I'm going to break your knees if you don't give me the deal that I want. I want your car for $1, and I'm going to break your knees if you don't do it. This is deal making. Okay, this is not deal making, right? And under no circumstances can you say yes to that, because if you could break my knees for $1, you just break my knees and take the car. And so Iran has told him no. So now the catch becomes, okay, what does the U.S. do? Does Trump really go through with the bombing of Iran? Or does Trump let Israel do it? And this even breaks into further things. Does Trump pretend as if he's against Israel doing it in the way that Joe Biden pretended he was against Israel going through Gaza, while allowing Israel to do the strikes? Now, the New York Times acts as if, based on anonymous sources, that there was tense contact between Trump and Netanyahu on this issue of attacking Iran. And that Netanyahu even went so far as to say, we will do it without you, and went through developing war plans of attacking Iran without the help of the United States. It's this part in the paper that I love. At the very end is, I think, the reality. After, 20 paragraphs, you get this part where it says they think that right here, Israeli officials have told their American counterparts that Mr. Netanyahu could order a strike on Iran, even if a successful diplomatic agreement is reached. It says, after his White House meeting with Trump in April, Mr. Netanyahu ordered Israeli national security officials to continue planning a strike on Iran, including small operations that would not require U.S. assistance, according to multiple people briefed on the matter. Israel has has many different plans on the shelf, ranging from surgical days of bombings of Iranian facilities, including some in crowded cities. So effectively killing civilians in the same way that they've been killing civilians in Gaza. It's the same military assessment raised questions about the effectiveness of a unilateral strike. Basically, the U.S. doesn't quite believe it's going to work. But right here. And some Israeli officials close to Mr. Netanyahu believe the U.S. will have no choice but to assist the Israeli military if Iran counterattacks. It's that part. So even if I'm supposed to believe that Donald Trump doesn't want a war with Iran, what Israel believes is if they attack us, which they will, and it will be overwhelming, that the U.S. will be forced to get involved to save our ass, meaning the U.S. gets involved in the way you look at it.
That's exactly what Donald Trump wants you to believe. Donald Trump,
Right there.
the Democrats too, they all wanted you to believe that if they get into a war with Iran, Netanyahu made them do it. This is such rancid, stinking, putrid bullshit, Jamal. I'm sick and tired of hearing this crap. There is no way in the world that little pipsqueak of a country that has aroused so much fury in a region containing hundreds of millions of seething Arabs is going to jeopardize its lifeline to Washington by dragging the United States into a war. Okay, they are psychotic, but they're not like totally irrational and suicidal. They understand one thing. They understand that without U.S. government support, they're dead. They're completely dead. The state is finished. They're finished. They're all getting frog marched off to The Hague or some other tribunal that they're done. So they're not going to jeopardize American support. They're not going to roll the dice on that. That is something they have to preserve. So I say to you, anybody out there listening, please understand that if Israel attacks Iran, it got the green light from Washington. It got the green light from Washington. Now, I will say this. I will qualify it to this degree. The United States government is not monolithic, right? So there may well be people, and I'd be shocked if there aren't people who are influential and powerful within the U.S. government security and military apparatus who are sounding a strong note of caution and saying, don't do this. There probably are people who are implacably opposed to it. But we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, there are some very powerful people. Many of them are making their voices heard publicly. They want an attack on Iran. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's possible that there's going to be dissension in the U.S. government when the decision is made to attack Iran, if they do attack Iran. And I think that probably they're going to attack Iran in some way. This is the trajectory that this whole stupid thing is on. But they will have received the green light from powerful constituencies within the U.S. government. It's even possible that Trump himself will not really be on board, but at the end of the day, there were more powerful people in the U.S. security and military apparatus than him who say, yes, we want to attack Iran. So I will acknowledge that the U.S. government isn't monolithic. No government is. There are almost certainly voices of dissent. But you can be sure of one thing. If Israel attacks Iran, it will have been given the green light by very powerful actors within the U.S. government, which will probably include Donald Trump.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just don't buy this premise that Israel will attack Iran without the U.S. support. I just don't buy it. I don't. We give them 80% of their money. We give them the bombs. We give them the political support. We give them all that stuff. Part of the reason why those governments, like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, many of these other governments didn't get involved in Gaza, was the fear of the U.S. I would wager even on some level, some of the governments in Europe, they didn't want to go run afoul of the U.S. So like the notion that they would say, we're going to attack Iran, we don't care what you think. I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it.
And you know, I'm sorry to interrupt. I should have mentioned, and you may well be aware of this, Jamal. There was a poll that just came out, which confirmed what many of us have been saying and believe to be true. The vast majority of Americans don't want a war with Iran.
Of course.
The vast majority, even Republicans, the majority of Republicans don't want a war with Iran. So you think Trump doesn't know this? Of course he knows this. They all know this. So they have to make it seem like they're getting dragged into it. We didn't want it. We did everything we could to stop it. We had all these negotiations with the Iranians. They were being unreasonable. They wouldn't give up their nuclear program. It was such a limited ask that we made of them. We were even willing to lift sanctions if they gave up nuclear energy. But those unreasonable, fanatical Iranians, and then Israel attacked because it felt it was at risk. And what are we going to do?
Yeah.
What are we going to do? We have to go defend. This is what they want because they know that the vast majority of Americans are going to be very upset when the shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
Very upset.
And they want to distance themselves from that attack, which is my thought. That they were like, our hands weren't on this, but we got to protect Israel. I think that's the way they're trying to play it. And I think many of the European capitals are trying to do something similar with, all right, they're going through with the ethnic cleansing, but our hands aren't on it. See, we're complaining and we're threatening to stop negotiations, even though negotiations are taking place. Like, I think it's that. And I think we're being played in this kind of media space. I mean, we'll see. My curiosity is what is in Trump's mind? Because I don't, and the reason I say what's in Trump's mind, and people are like, what does it matter? I strongly suspect that Trump only knows what people tell him. I don't think he knows anything about the world in real terms. I think he's surrounded himself with people who dump things into him that he goes out and repeats. Now, he may not, and I give him the benefit of the doubt. And so, okay, even if he doesn't want a war, he may still end up in a war. I had a military guy on who made that point of saying, look, even Trump may not want a war, but he still might end up in a war with Iran just because of the factions that are in Washington that actually want that war. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it doesn't matter what's in his mind. Maybe it just matters.
It doesn't. What matters is what do the decision makers want? And Trump is not the only person who's going to decide what the U.S. government does. There are some very powerful people in the U.S. government. And hey, man, you know, I personally happen to be of the view that JFK was not killed by a lone wolf. Okay, there are a lot of people out there. Majority Americans share my view, by the way. Okay,
Same here.
There are very powerful and unscrupulous people in the United States government, and I think they're perfectly. Remember when Chuck Schumer went on like the Sunday talk shows and said the national security state can screw you 6 ways from Sunday or something, made an astonishing admission. Trump is aware of this. Trump is aware of this. So maybe at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what Trump wants or doesn't want, because other people are going to make the decision. The point here is that if the United States gets in a war with Iran, the people who have the power to decide in the United States government and military whether the U.S. goes to war will have given Israel the green light. I mean, it's beyond my comprehension that they wouldn't have given Israel a green light.
Agreed. 1,000% agree. I don't believe for a moment they would do it without consent of the U.S. I just don't. Which is what annoys me about the Western papers, because you would think that the New York Times would have the ability to say, "Hey, it's a bit weird if they do that." It's like, considering all the support the U.S. gives, and that 8 million people is not going to win a war against 80 million without bombs, weapons, and the U.S. backing them in doing so. And by the way, I've spoken to like Morandi and other Iranians, and their thought is Trump is bluffing, which I told them Trump is not. And B, that they're not worried about Israel. They're more concerned about the U.S., meaning they're not concerned about an attack from Israel. They don't believe that that attack would have any legs, that Israel would be functionally destroyed if it did try to attack them. That they're more concerned with the U.S. getting involved in a fight like that. So I suppose time will tell. But I agree with every word that came out of your mouth, Dimitri. One last thing. Yeah, we have a little bit of time.
Sure.
Interesting back and forth. So Russia's been on a punishing strike on Ukraine for the last several days. I think it's been going on for like 3 days. And I was showing the audience various clips from this, like Odessa being hit, Kiev being hit. I mean, just devastating hits day after day after day. Now, the reason that they said they were doing this, I suppose, is twofold. One, because Putin almost was taken down in a helicopter crash. But two, over the past week, Ukraine has launched like 1,000 drones at civilian targets in Russia. And this is Russia's effective response, going after military targets. In hundreds of hits, 7 people were killed. Now, I want people to put this in context. When we went after Yemen, we were blowing up places, like we blew up an apartment complex, killing like 80 people to get one guy. To put it in context, right? We've just shown you videos, or I just showed you videos of them bombing a school and burning children alive in that school with a little girl running through the flames trying to get out. Like, this is what we've been backing and supporting. Trump comes out with all the hypocrisy in the world saying, "Oh my God, Putin has gone crazy." They asked Trump, they said, "Hey, did you know that they tried to attack Putin's plane?" He said, "I didn't hear about that." Now, if I take that as honest, it's very possible Donald Trump doesn't know what's happening day to day. He just knows what he's told by people with their own agendas, which means Trump on some level is being maneuvered, I suspect, not just on Israel, but also on an issue of Russia and any kind of deal. So after that, Putin comes out and puts out a tweet. The tweet says just outrageous stuff. He says, "What
you said Putin put out a tweet. Did you mean
I'm sorry, Trump put out a tweet, right? Trump put out a tweet. Because I don't know if Putin even tweets. But Vladimir Putin doesn't realize it is, if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have happened to Russia. And I mean really bad, he's playing with fire. Again, Trump has no cards, but whatever. Medvedev, who I think is the voice of Russia, I think he's the honesty. Putin might be the velvet glove, but I think Medvedev is the honesty. He said, regarding Trump's words about Putin playing with fire, really bad things happening to Russia, I only know one really bad thing, and that's World War III. I hope Trump understands this. Basically, don't F with us. Don't F with us. F around to find out. And they are serious, considering that right now, Germany, Merz, has effectively said, let the cat out the bag, that any restraint on long-range missile strikes into Russia has been removed, and that Germany, UK, France, and he intimated that the US, even though Trump says he's thinking about it, is allowing these strikes. Russia has come out, once again, as Putin has already said, this was a red line, saying we will target your countries, meaning Germany, for the first time, will get hit by a Russian missile, especially at the factory that produces those missiles or that houses those missiles. This is a radical escalation. Give me your thoughts on this. I know that's a long intro, but I'm trying to give context to what we're talking about. Give me your thoughts.
I don't think that the situation in Ukraine has become materially less dangerous than it was when Biden was in office. And I think what you've just recounted so eloquently is ironclad proof of that. We are still on the escalatory ladder. We're still dealing with people in the West who are capable of any provocation, no matter how dangerous it may be to the existence of humanity. I mean, you may recall, Jamal, that they initially weren't going to provide any long-range weapons to Ukraine at all. There was a huge, oh, you can't do that. That's so dangerous. They did.
Yeah.
And then they said, we're going to put restrictions on it. And now they're lifting the restrictions. And this is after Donald Trump came to office promising to end the Ukraine war within 24 hours. This, too, is a bunch of kabuki theater. This is all nonsense. What Donald Trump wants is he wants to pause, not freeze. He wants to pause the Ukraine war so America can reallocate its military assets and its intelligence capabilities to West Asia and to the Indo-Pacific region. And they'll finish with Russia later. That's the intention. They're going to come back. They want to eliminate any and all resistance to Western hegemony. And Russia has to be dealt with sooner or later if they're going to achieve that objective. But there's a guy named Wes Mitchell, you may have heard of him, who was a deputy secretary of state under the first Trump administration, who's been writing articles which basically lays out, some people like John Helmer say he's effectively the brains of Trump's foreign policy. And he says, look, we have to be realistic. We can't fight and win 2 or 3 major wars at the same time. So what we have to do is we have to put that one on hold because we have more pressing issues to deal with. And this is consistent with the speech that Pete Hegseth gave to the Ukraine contact group in February of this year, where he said to the Europeans, you need to massively increase military spending to replace the provision of our weaponry to Ukraine. He didn't tell them stop arming Ukraine. He didn't tell them it's time for us to put an end to this war. He told them you need to send the weapons that we were sending formally because we have to reallocate. And he called it a division of labor.
Yeah.
The overall task remains the same, global hegemony. He just wanted to reallocate the burdens in a way that enabled the United States to deal with its highest priorities first.
Which is China. Which is China.
Absolutely.
They have been trying to pivot to China, going all the way back to Obama, and have not been able to do it. They've been stuck in these wars in Ukraine and whatnot, and Israel for that matter. What do you make of this notion of multipolarity? Like, I don't get the sense that the U.S. has given up this idea of unipolarity yet, even though Trump may have said this is a multipolar world.
Yeah, I don't believe I don't believe they're prepared to allow any state to have an equal seat at the table.
Yeah.
And least of all, a non-Western state, non-white people. No, that's not happening. They're horrified by that. So ultimately, they're going to do whatever's necessary to undermine the growing power of the non-Western world, and they're going to fail. And the real question for us, I hate to repeat myself, is whether we're going to survive as a species. Their attempts to stop the inevitable. They have the capacity to wipe us all out. That's what worries me the most, and that's frankly what should be worrying all of us the most. I used to spend a lot of time talking about the climate crisis, Jamal, and I'm as concerned about that as anybody. I don't talk about it anymore because it's a long-term threat. There's a much more immediate threat. If we don't survive the more immediate threat of nuclear-armed Western states hell-bent on maintaining global hegemony at any cost, well, the climate crisis is like peanuts. I mean, we could end the conditions for civilized life on this planet within a matter of days with nuclear weapons. So that's a longer-term crisis. I think we need to refocus. Those of us I've been saying this to people in the climate movement. We need to reorient our attention, our resources to war. The number one priority of all people of conscience today should be demilitarization, peace, denuclearization, because that is by far the greatest threat confronting us.
Do you think that's even possible, though? I mean, and do you ever read Frank Herbert? Like the guy who wrote Dune? I think Frank Herbert is a god, by the way. I think God, the man is just amazing. Many of those books are just political books. That has a wrapping, or these kind of political spirituality wrapped around a story. And Frank Herbert goes into political philosophy a lot in those books, especially in God Emperor Doom. And one of the things he points out is that leaders tend to be sociopaths. That the people who crave power are typically people who are willing to do anything to get power in the first place. And that a society has to somehow insulate itself from those people getting power and allowing people who don't want it, and then making it a miserable job at that when they get it, to dissuade those people from taking power. Now, I don't know how you do that, which is why I guess I'm asking this question. Do you think that's even possible? I mean,
That's
yeah,
a question.
I guess
That question's not a luxury that we have.
Yeah.
If it's not possible, it's over. So why am I going to sit there and debate whether or not it's possible? It has to be done
it has to
by
happen.
any and all means. Has to be done. These people have to be removed from power. They're not going to save us. We need to remove them from power. And I do believe it's possible for what it's worth, but I just don't see any utility in getting into a debate about that, because we have to do it.
It has to be
Otherwise,
done.
we're caged.
Do you consider a beachhead, or let's say the crisis point, the issue in Ukraine? I mean, and the reason why I say that, I mean, you might be able to say the issue in Gaza might be one, but the issue in Ukraine, and the reason I say that, it seems that that's a flashpoint. That's where you can conceivably, maybe in South China Sea, if the US, I mean, we have 500 troops in Taiwan, if anything pops off there, then that's a potential flashpoint. But in Ukraine, you have direct conflict between nuclear powers. I mean, France is a nuclear power. The UK is a nuclear power. Russia is obviously nuclear powered. Like, these guys are literally rubbing against each other. Whereas now, some of these nuclear powers are saying we're going to hit Russia directly because now they're a party to the war, if indeed they do. Is that the flashpoint for this? Is this where this either goes to shit or we have a new world?
It certainly could go to shit there. It could go, there's a number of places we could end up in a nuclear conflagration. I personally think it's most likely to happen in West Asia.
I see.
I think there's a real danger that Israel is going to nuke Iran. A serious danger. Look, they don't like to talk about it, the Iranian leadership, and I totally understand why. But I'm sure that weighs very heavily on their minds. Why haven't they sent True Promise 3 on its way to the genocidal entity? Why haven't they retaliated for Israel's last attack, as ineffectual as it may have been? Because they know that these people are capable of nuking Iran. And not only that, of course, but if they do attack Iran, I don't think that Russia and China are going to stand idly by. I don't think that Russia and China are going to send their own military forces to fight shoulder to shoulder with Iranians. But I do think they're going to provide whatever military and intelligence capability they can, and they'll try to do it as covertly as they can. And that could escalate. I don't think you're going to see, if for example, using Russian intelligence, Chinese intelligence, air defense capabilities, the Iranians start taking down F-35s from the U.S. Air Force and the Israeli Air Force, or both, that you're going to see the level of restraint that Russia has shown when Ukraine used Western weapons to kill Russians. I think the West is going to react very negatively to that, and that could escalate very quickly out of control. So there are two ways we could end up in a nuclear conflagration in West Asia. One is the rabid Israeli attack dog using nukes, and the other is the United States. Ultimately, it finds itself in a position it's taking serious casualties from a conventional military perspective and decides to escalate. I think it's more likely to happen that way. But all three of them are potentially existentially dangerous.
No, Dimitri, you're right. I guess I've been so focused on the Russia-Ukraine issue that I guess I didn't think of it in those terms, but you're absolutely right. People keep asking, where's True Promise 3? In fact, I think it was Pepe Escobar, when he was in Iran, he was asked, one of the delegates, one of the military leaders, why haven't you fired True Promise 3? And I think you've just answered it. And, oh God, man, that brings up other questions of tripwires. Like, they made the point of saying European troops in Ukraine is a tripwire. Okay, but Israel can also launch a tripwire. If it attacks Iran, Iran responds overwhelmingly, and Israel decides that they need to use nukes because a country of 8 million can't deal with a country of 80 million, and it can't deal with the weapons arsenal of Iran. okay, the world is different immediately. Oh, wow.
I think Iran is going to wait until the last possible second to deliver the kind of damage to Israel that it can truly deliver. It will do everything possible to avoid inflicting a devastating blow on Israel, because I think they expect that the next step Israel will take will be to nuke Iran. That's why they've shown such patience. I think it's obvious. What would you do if you were in their position?
No, agreed. But the problem is, provocateur is provoking you for a reason. Like, if you keep poking and keep poking and keep poking, and you come to the conclusion, okay, your pragmatism is weakness. And so now we can respond because we know you're not. That creates a problem in regards to the relationship between the two sides. I mean,
I totally agree. Totally agree. That's the quandary they're in, right? If they don't deliver a deadly blow to Israel, Israel is emboldened. But if they do deliver a deadly blow to Israel, Israel may nuke them. So they're in a real quandary. And I think they struggle with this every day. You know, it's a very dangerous situation.
Oh, you're so right. What happens if that happens? Meaning, what does the world do if another nuke is fired by Israel in this case? I mean, are there legal issues? They're not part of the Non-Proliferation Act, but there's certain laws that are supposed to come into play when we know that Israel has nukes. I mean, even for the United States, it's part of the reason why we don't acknowledge they have nukes. Like, in a legal sense, what does the rest of the world do if indeed Israel ends up firing off nukes at Iran? It's hard for me to wrap my head around, even though I agree with you that that's the flashpoint.
Well, from a legal perspective, there's already ample grounds to prosecute Israel's leaders for war crimes and crimes against humanity. If they escalated to nuclear attack, there'd just be one more basis upon which you could hold them accountable for crimes against humanity. The real question is, practically speaking, what will the world do? Right. I would like to think that the moment Israel uses a single nuke, and let's obviously, pray that we never reach that point, but I would like to think that if Israel uses a single nuke, that would finally be the red line that causes all civilized nations and uncivilized nations to say, we have to bring this state to an end. We have to destroy it economically. We have to combine our military forces to contain it. We have to bring its leaders to justice. We have to prosecute them. We have to arrest them. I would like to think that, hopefully we won't get there, but that one nuke is all it would take finally for the world to stop this monster. And this is, I want to be very clear, this is a monster of the West's creation.
Right.
We created this monster, we feed this monster, we use this monster, our governments, to achieve their nefarious ends.
Oh, Dimitri, that freaks me out. You freaked me out in this conversation. Because I was consciously aware that they had nukes. I guess I didn't, and maybe this is my own naivety, I didn't put two and two together. Look, I don't like bullies. And I think the only thing they understand is being punched in the nose. And there's some cases where you need to put that dog down because that dog is not going to understand anything else. I consider Israel to be one of those. And the True Promise 3 thing, I never really pushed Iran on that because it's not me in the line of fire. It's Iran in the line of fire. But I didn't put two and two together that, okay, at a certain point, Israel will just lose nukes and not just use them, maybe provoking for the very expressed justification to use nukes. Well, we didn't have a choice. The U.S. didn't come to our aid. They attacked us overwhelmingly. And so, we had to respond with nuclear power. Regardless of what Iran wants, they could push for that aim. Netanyahu is a lunatic. There's nothing stopping him from attacking Iran with the idea of creating a provocation where he can try to justify using nuclear weapons. That is terrifying. And that
Jamal, the way I conceive of this is, how would we have all felt if Hitler had nukes? That's how we should feel about Israel having nukes. It's exactly the same danger.
But the world is not treating Israel as if they're Nazis. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. Exactly. And Nazis didn't have a superpower backing them. They were the superpower in that sense. So I don't know, from your mouth to God's ears, I don't want to see that reality come to fruition. I do get the sense that the U.S. or Iran or Israel will attack Iran, which puts us in a whole, a very difficult world. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Dimitri, man, you are fantastic. I don't even think I gave you an entry when I first brought you in. I think we immediately started the conversation. Dimitri Lascaris, he's a lawyer, journalist, and activist from Montreal, Quebec. In 2020, Dmitri ran for the leadership of the Green Party. And Dmitri, you also have your own YouTube channel. Please tell the audience when you do your shows and where they can find you.
So it's called Reason to Resist. The handle on YouTube is @Reason to Resist, with 2 being the number, no spaces. And, our focus is on geopolitics, international relations, international law from an anti-imperial, because that's what we think is, the thing that is most pressing at the moment for us to deal with. So please, if you check us out, and I'm also very active on Twitter, probably more than is good for my health, but there are my handles @Dmitri Lascaris. So
let me
thanks
ask you
a lot.
this before I let you go. Can you even conceive of a world that is not like this? And,
Oh, yeah.
That's a weird question to say. And what I mean by conceive, I mean that is substantive, that logically works. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. And that's a weird question, but I hope that makes sense.
I think it's entirely possible, but ultimately, for us to have a world that is humane, just, egalitarian, sustainable, just minimally decent, decision making must be in the hands of the people, and it's not. Never really has been on a broad scale. There have been instances where, there have been local instances, short-term democracy has been achieved. But on a global scale, we've never come close to that. If we had decision making on a global level that was coming from the people, I think we'd have a wonderful world. We'd solve our problems in no time. The problem is that we are ruled by genocidal psychopaths. That's the problem. We have to remove
I know,
them
but
from
those
power.
are people, and those are people who went through whatever mechanism that got them to that position. Meaning the institutions that set up the world came from something. It's not magic. There's some organizing principle. There's some rationale or reason why it's the way it is. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying there is a logic to it that is pervasive and that is persistent, that is generating the sociopaths who keeps getting in positions of authority. And as you pointed out, we've had local democracies, but even those, in the way that you put it, were temporary. Something in the way that people get to those positions, it's either a certain type of person or the person who gets there is changed through the process. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. Isn't it a process or systemic issue, not an individual thing?
Yes, it is a systemic. The system is spewing up, vomiting up psychopathic leaders, but ultimately it is the system. The system has to be dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. And I take part from the fact that there have been, even though we've never actually achieved, sustainable, broad-scale democracy, at least not that I'm aware of. There have been specific, victories, tangible, important victories that we have won. So, for example, today in many parts of the world, we have far more free speech than people had previously. Slavery used to be, institutionalized pretty much all over the world, and it was actually accepted. People didn't think of slavery as an evil institution, but now there is slavery in the world, but it's much more confined and it's broadly accepted, even by the elites, at least formally, that slavery is evil and that's something we ought not to tolerate. There has been progress, important progress. Noam Chomsky used to make this point all the time, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. But the real danger is that the people, we haven't removed these people from power, and they now have at their disposal more destructive capacity than any tyrant has ever had in human history. That is the pressing issue of our time.
Dmitri, fantastic. And you're right. We get, I don't know if the slave ever thought slavery would go away. right? Especially when you're in the context of it. Dmitri Lascaris, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Great conversation, man. Thank you. I always enjoy these. You have a
Me
good
too.
one, okay?
You too. Take care, Jamal.
All right. Always enjoy, Dimitri. Always enjoy the conversations. It's a worthy objective. It's just, sometimes it's hard to see around corners. Like, you know, did the slave think that slavery was going to last forever, or could they see past it? Or, you know, if you were in the middle of Nazi Germany, did you think it was going to last forever? You know, the 1,000-year Reich would last, what, 5 years, give or take? Yeah, I don't know. I guess every empire collapses at some point. But if you're in the middle of that empire, it feels eternal, that process, that system. And I think what I was getting at with Dmitri was he used the term vomit up. These are people. They go to the bathroom, they stump their toe, they get the cold, they get the sniffles, they have family members that they care about, that they may dislike. Victoria Nuland, as, you know, cantankerous troglodyte that she is, pudge face, chubby person, who's a horrible person who's gonna, you know, bust hell wide open. I would wager to you that she bakes cookies, obviously. She probably gives cookies to her grandkids. That's assuming anybody has ever had sex with her, where you could she has kids or grandkids. Meaning these are human beings. They're just sociopaths. Somewhere along the way, or maybe just in the way that they were already arranged, something indicated to them that this is the way this works. And this is the way to get ahead in this process. It's almost like if you're playing a game. And in the process of the game, you realize, okay, these things get me further ahead. These things get me further behind. It's like if I'm doing YouTube, right? And I'm titling videos. And you have some people who title these videos in these kind of extreme ways. And you look at videos like, dude, that's not even in your video. Okay, well, they do that because if trying to entice you to click on a video, they call it clickbait. But the reason that clickbait exists is because somewhere along the way, they thought, this is the way I get ahead. I get more views like this. And this game that we're engaged in is, how do I get more views? Because more views equals to more money and more views is me being successful. And so maybe just the way the system works, that's the way you get ahead. You plug along, you know, I must do these things because these are the things I must do in order to get from point A to point B. These are the things I must do to get successful. And as you pointed out for JFK, buck the trend, lose your head. I don't know. I would tell you, I'm always fascinated to talk to people who've been behind the curtain, like people who've worked in the CIA, people who've worked in, oh, that's right, that reminds me, John Kiriakou. By the way, Danny Haiphong, he's going to be on tomorrow. Jesus, I hope this, okay. John Kiriakou and Danny Haiphong will be joining us tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a power show. Richard Wolff is going to be here on Friday, by the way, just give a heads up. All right, we have a couple of minutes before Ted comes on. I've said I was going to do this because one of my audience members complained. Yes, I do listen to your complaints. If I agree with them, I try to change. If I don't, it's my show. Janice Anderson, Cedar can win debates against libertarians, but cannot win a debate with anyone actually on the left. On the rare occasions he tries, he fails miserably. You're right, he struggled with somebody on the left. He struggled. You're right about that, Janice. I've seen him, it depends on who's on the left. He got into a debate with Tim, what is his name? Tim Black. Tim Black. He ate Tim Black alive. Go watch that debate. Tim Black was defenseless. He ate him alive. It was humiliating, deeply, deeply humiliating. I've never seen a debate go that bad and that poorly before. Tim Black was just eaten alive. But other ones who can debate better, have been able to stand up and at the very least break even. But he is not somebody to take lightly. I'm telling you, he's not somebody to take lightly. Proceed with caution if you're going to take that route. Black learned the hard way. My man, Ted Rall. How you doing, Ted? You doing okay this morning?
I'm okay, Terrell. How are you? I'm a little congested. Allergies are kicking my butt, but whatever.
I'm doing okay. I'm a bit jet lagged, but I'm all right. I'm still plugging along. I'm glad you could join me, man. There's right much to hit on, right much to talk about. Have you been paying attention to Trump's quote unquote big beautiful bill, as he's been calling it?
I have, yes. In fact, it's actually not just that's the official name. It's the
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it's not just how he's been calling it; it's how it's called.
It's the idea.
Idiocracy, Mike Judge's film which was kind of banned, right? At the time it was never given. It was given a dutiful release by the studio because they were concerned that it was too insulting to the intelligence of the American public.
Seriously?
Yeah, it was never really released in theaters. And it's that, it's a cult classic now. It's Mike Judge, and it's so prescient.
It's so spot on.
When you go look at it, you're like, holy cow, this is exactly what happened. Right?
And just for the American public, like the people who may not know what we're talking about, Idiocracy is a movie that came out where the basis of the movie was that a regular guy, just rando guy, throw a rock at a guy, that guy ends up into the future. And when he gets into the future, I forget how many years.
500 years.
Okay, the IQ of everybody has diminished. And so that rando guy is the smartest guy on the planet. And that stupid people kept breeding where smart people stopped having children. And so the population got dumber and dumber and dumber over the course of time. And so he's like the president. Oh, I can't forget his name. He had the chainsaw. He had the wrestling outfit with the America thing on.
He's like Macho Camacho, but he's not Macho Camacho.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was like the president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was absurd. And people were watching it like, God, man, this seems outrageous. And then Trump gets in office, who was a wrestler at one point, right? He had a WWE.
Right. He's in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about it. Big,
and of course, Elon
Bill.
Musk, right? I mean, Elon Musk, just a few years ago, had like children's books being written about him as how he should be a role model, that basically he's our Edison. And now he's up there, acting like a goofus with his chainsaw and, he is a smart man. And that's part of and so is Donald Trump. It's one of the things that really bothers me about our culture is
I don't think
if
so.
you're intelligent, well, he's not like smart like the way we are, but he's smart. But he's smart, he's cunning. Donald Trump.
Okay, I'm sorry. Define that then. Define that for me, because I don't think he is. I think he is completely incompetent.
Well, first of all, he has the ability. What his whole shtick is, right? You see it like at his rallies. He throws shit at the wall, and whatever sticks, he repeats. Right? It's kind of the scientific method. And he doesn't take anything for granted. So, for example, I would argue that he completely reinvented campaigning, although pretty much nobody's noticed. So, for example, Hillary Clinton, when she launched her campaign in 2016, she paid $5 million for a stage in the shape of the United States to build in Queens that she could just stand on with Manhattan as a backdrop. I'm going to completely leave out the fact that probably Manhattan as a backdrop is not really the message you want to send to the country as a whole. But the point is, okay, so Donald Trump was like, it doesn't matter where I'm on TV. I can do this in an elementary school in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's free. They're happy to have me come and talk. And I'm on TV. Also, he killed the stump speech. The whole idea, you give the same speech at every single place. Okay, well, we don't live in the age of railroads anymore. We have TV. If I see Donald Trump in Altoona and then I see him in Allentown, he better say two different things. Otherwise, why am I watching twice? That's why, he kept getting covered, because he didn't have a speech. He just goes up there and it's free-form jazz. He just talks about whatever's on his mind. So therefore, he might say anything. So CNN has to watch. That's revolutionary. Honestly, most candidates, Kamala Harris was still giving stump speeches in the last cycle. Why? It literally means there's only interest in the speech the first time it's delivered, and that's it. So there's just all sorts of things like that he did. But I guess my point is that in this country, you have to quote the punk band Flipper, act stupider than you really are. And that sucks. I mean, really, truly. I mean,
I don't think he's acting. I just don't think he's acting. Look, I'll give you this, for example. Two things. One, every movement in a direction is not progression. So, like, just because you move in a particular direction doesn't mean you might advance, but it doesn't mean you're going in a positive direction. And I'm saying that to say there is a difference between what is in the best interest of the country versus what is in the best interest of the individual or the candidate. Me making $1 trillion is great for me. It may not necessarily be a great thing for the country as a whole. It's kind of like the debate thing when Trump is like, or Kamala Harris is like, I don't need a debate. I'm ahead of the polls. And then when she falls behind in the polls, Trump is like, well, I don't need another debate. Because at this point, now he is ahead. And he was doing this in the primaries where he wouldn't debate anybody. He only had downward to go. And so why am I going to risk falling in the polls to somebody who I'm already 30 points above? I'm not going to debate. Is that good for the country? Hell no. It's not. Is it good for Trump? Yes. And I'm saying doing that stump speech is supposed to communicate something to the audience about what you plan to do when you get in office. As you point out, he can talk about anything. He can talk about goldfish. Yeah, my hamster died when I was 4 years old, and they would listen to it and be like, oh my God. And it's like, okay, dude, I get it. You can talk about anything for 5 hours. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's comical. Sometimes he's mocking people. But it's not communicating anything that is substantive, that helps anybody. No. It's just jazz. It's comedic jazz.
It is jazz. Yeah.
But it works. I think it's your point. It does work. I agree with you. It works. But God, that sucks as a way of going about things.
And that's what the American people want. Apparently, the American people don't want homeless people to have a place to live. Apparently, they don't want to not have to worry about money if they get a tumor. Apparently, they don't want to be able to send their kids to college. Apparently, they don't want the earth to stop boiling. but they want entertainment as we all die. Yeah.
What is it, brain circus?
I'm sorry, I got you. I completely derailed you from the big, beautiful.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's just, Jesus Christ. It just sucks. Like, sometimes you need to eat your peas. Like, there's a reason that parents don't feed their kids Jello and ding dongs 3 times a day, even though the kid would eat, Yoo-hoo and ding dongs 3 times a day if you gave it to him.
100%.
Hey, I need you to eat your peas. Why? Because this may be bland and boring, but you need this. You need this.
They won't kill you as fast. So
I tell my audience at times, it's like, I'm going to bring this person on. This person's going to get 2 views. I don't care. You need to eat your peas. It's just stuff.
I hope I'm not that person.
No, you're not that person. The audience loves you. You've seen it forever.
I want to be entertaining too.
No, there's some places around the globe that I know my audience doesn't care about. I just know it. I just know as a flat. They're not going to care about this, but they should know about this. It's just that.
Although I do think you can make anything super entertaining if it's presented correctly. So, for example, back years ago when I had a radio show in LA, I was trying to do. I was having a similar conversation with a friend about like how basically like you couldn't get Americans didn't care about foreign policy and they didn't care about things that were remote or that countries they'd never heard of or couldn't spell. So to try to illustrate this, I created a segment called Stand Watch, breaking news from Central Asia. And it was like basically, so it was very serious. It was literally the news from Central Asian former Soviet republics, which is a super interesting part of the world. But I even got granular down to the weather, everything. Anyway, this was meant to be a prank, to be a joke, right? Joke was on me. The ratings spiked during that period.
Really?
Stand Watch became a phenomenon. There were T-shirts. It ended up getting picked up by NPR and the BBC.
Are you serious?
We ended up in the end having a trip where we brought like 20 of our listeners to Central Asia with me along to do this. And I mean, the point is, I was wrong. The people really did want to hear about this place that they had never heard of, and Americans are thirsty for knowledge, but it's not. If you think about like say the way parliamentary politics in Europe are presented. Like,
Oh, those are fun to
I'm
watch.
super. You and I are both informed about this stuff.
Yeah, I love to watch that stuff.
But I'm so frustrated because it's so like they don't explain any context. They don't. It's boring. There's I don't understand why things are happening, what's going to happen, how it affects the world, how it affects me. It's sort of like, so fucking what? That's how it's presented. Like whether.
But that's the point, though.
Yeah.
The point is not to say stuff. The point is to be able to meaning you ask the question and to get out of that question without having to explain anything. That's the entire point. It's rhetoric.
Yeah. It's rhetoric.
Yeah, it's rhetoric. It's unfortunate.
But it's rhetoric. Like, I also think that to some extent, they don't know how to present this stuff. I mean,
I see.
You know what I mean? Like, I think they're just boring people. I mean, if you think about the kind of people who work at like NPR, Berlin bureau, they're not going to hire dudes like us. They should. I mean, we do better for them, but that's the problem.
We'd go off the rails.
Yeah,
we'd go off the rails.
People would care, and people would listen.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, I do. The majority of the show that we do on this channel is international politics. And as you point out, there's a segment of America that is thirsty to understand why in a way that media doesn't present. So no, I agree with you on that front. But yeah, it feels like idiocracy on some level. Like you watch you watch the president. I guess my thing is define smart. Somebody say he's cunning, not necessarily smart. And the reason why I say that is I don't know how much he knows about the rest of the world.
Oh,
if he knows anything.
Very little. Like I think he takes in everything on an emotional level. So for example, when you hear him talk about say Gaza or Ukraine, he'll say like he will get genuine about like, it's horrible. All these people are dying, like so many young men. But he has no context for example, the long-standing. He doesn't know, for example, that Ukraine is divided between ethnic Ukrainians and ethnic Russians and other groups. He doesn't understand that. He wouldn't know how that happened, why that would have happened. He doesn't know about the formation of the State of Israel or the Nakba, the background, the systemic apartheid regime that's been established both in the occupied territories and in Israel proper. He doesn't know the resentments, the long stand, or for that matter, that Hamas was installed and funded by Israel. All these things would. I mean, someone should explain it to him. I think he'd be smart enough to understand it. I think he's just incurious. We've had a lot of really incurious presidents. George W. Bush was always described that way. I don't think Jimmy Carter was that way. I think he may be the last. I mean, I think of Barack Obama as probably one of the more intelligent presidents we've had lately, but he's not the most curious guy either. I mean, I think he kind of knows most of the basics, but he's not like a deep diving, or if he is, he's not revealing that on the public stage.
Well, I think he's an ideologue. In fact, I think most of these people are ideologues, especially when you become president. I think something, and you tell me, you know history far better than I do. When you take the mantle on, you have a certain point of view, and you function with that point of view. So I'm now the president. I can tell people what to do, wherever they are in the world. And
that's exactly right.
Yeah, they chafe at it. So it's like even if Obama did understand the Ukraine conflict, it didn't stop him from knocking over the government of Ukraine. Like meaning, from the American point of view, this is just what we do. So like his understanding of it didn't change his tenor towards expanding NATO. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this. That's the way I look at it.
No, I think that's right. I mean, like I also think part of it, and part of the incuriosity is, can you imagine, Jamal, like you and I, let's say you're the president and I'm the vice president, and we're like running the country. I mean, we could get anyone we wanted to tell us, to any expert on any field. You could like, President Thomas would like a briefing from you at the White House. Everybody, captains of industry, leading experts in their academics, they drop whatever they're doing. President Thomas wants to see me at the White House. You go, right? And so the thing is that like you don't for example, these guys don't have academics come in. That always freaks me out. Like they literally, half my cabinet would be professors. I mean, it's like they know the most about these topics, right? And it's like, I mean, to me, it's crazy. Like, like the nation's leading economist should be the Secretary of the Treasury and the head of the Federal Reserve Bank or both. We don't do that, right? It's really, really, I mean, it's nuts. And so like that's part of the curiosity, right? It's like bringing the right people at the table, like Barack Obama and all of these guys. They, when they look around at that table, I mean, this is a clown show right now. But that was true under Biden. I've just finished reading Jake Tapper's book. That was true under Biden too. It was a clown show of a different sort. And you have to go back to the Obama years to see like sort of an old-fashioned traditional group of cabinet members who kind of basically within a certain mainstream kind of way know what they're doing and know what they're talking about. But they're very, they're just not that, they're not that sharp. They're not the best and the brightest, right? I think described JFK's cabinet, which may or may not have been true, right? But that's not the standard now. So I mean, if I were Biden in 2022, and for all we know, by the way, it's Jill Stein. I mean, sorry, it's Jill Biden, not Jill Stein. Sadly, not Jill Stein. It's
running
Jill
the White
Biden
House.
who basically started the proxy war with Russia, right? That may well have been the case. We don't know. It wasn't Joe. And but the Biden administration could have brought in the leading experts about the post-Soviet space from far left to far right and everything in between to just get deep analysis. They didn't do that. Nobody there was at the table saying, Putin's pissed because Gorbachev was promised that NATO would not expand beyond where it was then. And we kept breaking that promise, and Clinton was fucking with the Russians, and now we've really crossed their line in the sand. There's no one at the table saying like, if I were Putin, this is what I'd be thinking. They're not doing that, so they keep making stupid mistakes,
But you're saying that as if they care.
Well,
I don't think they
that's
do.
my point. They don't care.
No, what I mean,
They don't care about getting the right info.
exactly. Meaning they have a political objective. That's all that matters. The political objective. And our political objective is we want to expand NATO to the border of Russia. We want to knock over the government of Ukraine. We want to destabilize Russia. We want to break up Russia. Meaning they have objectives to accomplish.
But then also they're not thinking about it like, okay, so what if we succeeded in? I mean, that's the thing too, right? Like, what if you succeeded in destabilizing Russia? Let's say Russia were to collapse. I mean, think about the geopolitical and economic implications that would impact the United States economy and our own. It would make America less safe. Every time we've destabilized places, Iraq, Afghanistan, it's always come back. There's always been blowback, and there's no one at the table who says that, right?
They don't care.
They
don't care. In their minds, they're insulated. So even if there's blowback, it's not hitting us, meaning whatever the elite is. And two, when we finally settle it, it will be under our control. I legit think so when they look at it. They accept the blowback. They accept the fire because they themselves are not the ones being hit. Like, it's one thing if George Bush was hit in 9/11. Okay, that's different, right? That's not usually what happens. I mean, when that CEO from the healthcare got popped, and they flipped out. Like, oh my God. They flipped out because, oh my God, one of us has gotten killed for something that one of us was doing. Normally, I know I keep bringing up books. There is this great scene in Death's End in the Three Body series where the guy says, one scientist tells another, he says, I believe there's always one seat at the table that never gets hit. Like that, meaning that seat is always there, regardless of what happens in the world. That table always remained made. And he said, in this table, there's no fucking seat that won't be unseated. His point being that this is not a situation where there's going to be a seat that remains at the table. Everybody gets taken out.
No, I mean, look, your point is taken. That's 99.99999% of the time. That's exactly how it goes.
Yeah.
And it's very striking when you see the counterfactual, right? Like if you look at the video of Ceausescu right before he's shot, right?
Mhm.
And he and his wife are on trial. It's what's really striking is the look on both of their eyes. In their eyes, it's sort of like, wait, you're going to hurt me?
Yeah.
Me? I mean, me. That's me we're talking about here. Like,
Right.
When hurt happens, it usually happens to other people. Like, but now, wait, what? And I mean, the shock of it, up until the moment that they're shot, that their guns down, right? They just have this like, holy shit.
This is real. Yeah.
Because that's what revolution is, right? It's revolution is like every now and then, like, half a dozen times or a dozen times or 24 times in our history, sometimes like the revolution comes for the people at the table that you described who never get affected. But it's so rare. That's why we write books about it. For the most part, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and because it doesn't happen, they feel insulated. They feel untouched.
And
they don't care.
They're kind of right. I mean, of course, they're right until they're not. I mean, what's sad is that there's no. What's sad is that like we see everything from. We think, well, at least in your self-interest, you should, you would want to be remembered fondly, let's say, but no.
Well, that's why you're propaganda.
Really, but I mean, but what about just fucking common decency? Weren't you raised right?
It doesn't matter. That's what I keep saying.
When they tell you to care about other people, I mean, what the fuck?
My mom hates it when I tell her this. I said, look, when you're looking at geopolitics, morality doesn't matter. Ethics doesn't matter. Only in so much as you can use it to attack your opponent. None of this stuff matters. You have political objectives that you want to accomplish. And because if you look at the world as an atheist and you said, none of this stuff matters, I'm not going to be punished if I die. I have objectives that I want to accomplish. And in those objectives that I want to accomplish, people may get hurt, but I'm going to accomplish those objectives. And even though there's going to be chaos, like for example, Iraq, the U.S. is, despite the fact that Iraq turned into a dumpster fire after we overthrew the country, ISIS and everything else came out, we still control Iraq. We're still in control.
True.
And in Syria, same thing, right? Syria may turn into another civil war, but ultimately, from our point of view, our guy is now in Syria right now, even though it took billions of dollars, 20, 30 years for it to happen. Our guy is in Syria. That's the way they look at it.
Right. Although the way I would look at it is, is he really our guy? I mean, is he really? I mean, I wouldn't trust that bearded mofo further than I could throw him.
He shaved the beard, by the way. He doesn't really have a beard.
But I wouldn't trust that guy at all.
Is he really our guy? Look, we don't get to choose angels for those roles. You need a bearded guy who's a sociopath, who's willing to do that in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just who you get to choose. It's just your choice.
I know. And you can also, again, see the counterfactuals. Like every now and then, someone who's not a total shithead somehow squeezes through.
Putin.
A Vaclav Havel, like Akayev, the president of Kyrgyzstan, long forgotten. He was the only democratically elected president of a former Soviet Central Asian republic. Bush had him overthrown. He had to go, because he was like a and you know why? He had the temerity to ask the Americans to pay some rent on the airbase that we have in Bishkek. And we're like, oh, we don't pay. We overthrow you is what we do instead. And we put
that was the wrong thing too, right?
And we turn your country into a failed state. That's what we do. And then we keep the airbase.
That was the wrong thing. Oh God, Medvedev, I think, where he was like, hey, we want to use the oil money for the benefit of Iran.
Yeah,
and
like
the guy has
our
to
own
go.
Iranian oil.
Yep. It's like the guy has to go.
Right.
And Putin is one of those people who squeezed through. I'm glad you brought that up. This wasn't a planned conversation, but it doesn't matter. The audience seems to love it. We jumped like 30 views. So this is the guy talking about Putin. Because, you would know, as a student of history, Boris Yeltsin was effectively under the thumb of the U.S.
Oh, and he
You
was
know,
yeah,
yeah.
just a total clown show, total asshole, drunkard, loser.
Like we love the fact. In fact, we helped get Boris Yeltsin in office. There's a Time in Life magazine called "Welcome the Yanks" or something like that, or "Here Comes the Yanks," and it points out how Bill Clinton put in propaganda teams in order to help Yeltsin get into office because the communist was going to most likely win it.
Yeah.
All right. Putin was the VP. Listen to this clip. Listen to what this guy says about part of the reason why they hate Putin so much.
There was a deep state in Russia in the 1990s, these oligarchs.
Yes.
And we lost control over Russia. They're basically analogizing Trump to Putin. And they're saying we had all this control. We had total control over Russia during the Boris Yeltsin period. And we had all these relationships with the Russian oligarchs. But then Putin had a natural advantage as being the head of state, was somehow able to take over the Russian deep state. And then we lost control over Russia.
This is right. This is like the heart of it that nobody ever says. It's Putin's decision to decapitate the oligarchy.
Mhm.
That's the reason they hate him.
Right there. Meaning when Yeltsin was in power, they effectively had some level of control over Russia, especially from the standpoint of the oligarchs that were in charge. This is what Ritter, if you ever listen to Ritter makes this point, he makes it extremely well. I thought when Putin came in, that went away. Like he effectively wrestled power away from those oligarchs.
Oh yeah,
But
and in a very hardcore way, right? Like
Yeah.
like Yukos and all those guys, all the oil guys. He was just like, I'm. It's kind of like the law is the law and property rights are property rights, but this has gone too far. And basically, the state was powerless at that point. So he decided to wrestle back control. It's like you can have a country in the modern era, in a post 1991 space that is, run by a nation state and a government the way Russia is now, or it could be the Wild West anarchy run by corporations and oligarchs, who were, by the way, assassinating each other right and left and turning the streets of Moscow into, bloody asphalt. I mean, I know I was there when it was going on. I mean, in the 90s. One time I'm staying at the Radisson in Moscow, and just second night I'm there. I'm like, it's like the doormen are like, please wait. We're cleaning up. A guy was just killed right in front of the hotel.
Are you
We're cleaning up
serious?
the body. Happened all the time. It was like routine. I mean, so it was anarchic, right? And it would have been disturbing for anybody, but particularly, Soviets were, citizens were used to living in a well-ordered society, and then suddenly that vanished. And so, and Yeltsin presided over nothing. I mean, he was living at the bottom of a bottle, and there was no government. And that was what George H.W. Bush and then Bill Clinton, that's what they wanted. And, and so like anybody who, I mean, if you know that history, you know why Putin's popular, because it's like, we're not going back to that crap. And, I don't blame them at all.
Wow. America doesn't know that. America just doesn't know that.
We made that happen. I mean, just think about like the opportunity. Again, President Thomas, Vice President Rall, like it's 1991. It's like we can't, there's a world in which on Christmas Day, 1991, we can call up whoever is in charge of the Kremlin and say, listen, this is your big capitalist friends calling. We're very happy that you've decided to join the club. We're going to throw billions of dollars at you. We're going to help you make a soft landing. We're going to bring you in from transition from socialism over to a market economy. We're going to help fund it. If there's going to be some bumps along the way, but your people aren't going to starve. We're going to make sure there's law and order. We're going to show you how we do it. It's going to take 20, 30 years, but we'll help you out. That's not what we did. And by the way, if we'd done that, Russia would be our ally. I mean, we would be close. We would be between them and us. We'd be ruling the world. I mean, it was a missed opportunity. And but it's like when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, like I like to say. And
this was Jeffrey Sachs' thing, by the way. Jeffrey Sachs points this out, where Jeffrey Sachs was a true believer at one point. He goes over and he's telling America, hey, we need like a Marshall Plan for Russia and, this kind of breakup of the republics. And they told Sachs flat out, we're not helping them. This is not about helping them. That's not what we're doing. It's like, screw, look, they will never rise again. What's the point? They will never get to a point where they will challenge the U.S. hegemony.
Which, by the way, didn't happen. It's like, well, they're going to rise again because they're the biggest country in the world. They have 11 time zones and more natural resources, and they've been in their crisis tested, right? These are Russians. They've been through everything. You think our little sanctions are going to annoy them? Like, you don't know these people. They lost 28 million people in one war. So it's like, yeah, of course they're going to rise again. They're going to rise again. The question is just, are you going to be their friend or their enemy? That's up to you,
And we decided enemy. We looked at them
stupidly, really stupidly, unnecessarily. I mean, I always think about Putin when he was mayor of St. Petersburg. He was so pro-American that he thought the future was with Europe. He asked to join NATO. He wanted,
yes, he did.
And then Bill Clinton's like, he wants to join NATO. What? And the street, he had all the street signs convert. It's like, don't you understand? NATO is about hating you.
Right.
It's like, and then all the street signs in St. Petersburg were converted to dual language, Russian and English. It's still today. There's English light.
Are they? I didn't know. See, I've never been. I'm so jealous that you've been able to go. I've always
in
wanted
Moscow
to go.
too. It's like no problem. It's like, how Americans are always like, well, what if I went to this country and I didn't speak the language? No worries in Russia. I mean, there's English. There's English signs everywhere. That's not true in China at all. So it's like they did that because they really thought that was, they wanted to have the lingua franca. They wanted all the tourists to come over. I mean, he was totally like, I'm on Team America, USA. And we just told him to fuck off. It's like Fidel Castro when he took over Cuba. He reached out to the U.S. and said, I want an alliance. I want to get along. I mean, let's have full trade relations. We were like, you're a communist. Fuck you.
Wow.
And here we are all these years later. It's madness, really. Ho Chi Minh, when he was inaugurated, if you look at picture, you can look it up on Google image search. When he was inaugurated, there were communist flags interspersed with U.S. flags at his inauguration, because the U.S. was anti-colonialist, and he thought, he actually believed our rhetoric that we were anti-colonialist, and he thought and he based the Viet Minh Constitution on the U.S. Constitution. He was inspired by the U.S. He wanted to be buds with us.
That's called soft power. Yeah. That's called soft power.
Yeah.
Meaning, I don't need to be at war with you if culturally I can bring you onto my side.
Yeah.
But that's soft power.
But you're a communist. No.
That's
the assessment. I mean, if you watch, it's that 27-part documentary about the Vietnam War on PBS. I forget the name.
Ken Burns? Is it Ken Burns?
Ken Burns one.
Yeah.
And it's in that, it's not perfect, but it's good. And it talks about, they keep saying what we just never understood was this was a nationalist movement. It was more than it was a socialist movement. And we just never understood that they weren't our ideological enemies. They just wanted self-determination. And I'm thinking, just like they just said all the time. All you had to do was
listen to what they said. By the way, I need to let you go, but Robert McNamara, that's another really good documentary. Mm-hmm. It's called
Fog of War.
Fog of War. Okay, you already. God, I should have known that you already know it. That is a fantastic documentary.
Yeah,
and it's like an old man at the end of his life, looking over his failures and fuck ups.
Yeah,
that's what it put me in the mind of. I mean, even in the very beginning, it sounds like the guy's yelling at Robert McNamara. He's like, well, why did you do blah, blah, blah? And McNamara has responded, but it sounds like the guy's yelling at him, almost like he's chastising him. It is a fantastic documentary.
So good.
But at one point, he points out, he says, rationality is not always rational. Oh, I love that.
That's so good.
It's so good. And he's trying to make this argument look, you can take rational actions. And I think he's wrong, by the way. Rationality is always rational. It's tethered to something. It's not untethered.
Or maybe you're not in the best position yourself to assess whether you're being rational. That's why if you're not sure, especially in a crisis, the best move is to surround yourself by advisors and consigliaries who are people who don't see things your way, who come from a different background, and they can be like, Ted, you're kind of fucking up here. And it's like, oh, really? And then you have to be open to that. You have to be like, oh, shit, really? But
Ted, I'm going to have to let you go, man. I always love these conversations. The audience loves you. I think we gained like 30, 40 viewers just with us, just having a conversation.
Hello, viewers. Love you, too.
Ted Rall, he's a political analyst, cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of the TMI show with the beautiful, the lovely, the fantastic Manila Chan.
Right after this.
Right after this. He comes on at 10 a.m. So definitely check him out. Ted, man, thank you for this. Always appreciate you. I love these conversations. Thank you for
pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
All right. I would like to bring in my guest, the one, the only, the man of the hour that all of my audience loves, the KJ No. KJ No, he is, there we are. He is a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia-Pacific region, contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator, one censored by Amazon. Is it available at iacenter.org? He is also on Breakthrough News Network on the show called China Report. KJ, man, how you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm doing well. Good to be with you.
That McNamara thing, man, rationality is not always rational. Oh, I love that quote, even though I think the quote is so wrong. Even though I really got his point.
A quick comment about that film.
Please.
It's a very interesting documentary.
Fog of War.
Yeah, Fog of War, very well constructed. And it shows how this, McNamara's, quantitative approach, which he thought was rational, was actually not capturing the real metrics of the war.
Like there. Because it's tethered. Rationality is not like this dandelion in the wind. It's tethered. If I ain't playing a game of chess, I have an objective. And my rationality is based upon the objective that I have, that I'm trying to accomplish. It's not just, random. I'm sorry, KJ, please.
Yeah, but I think the thing to note is the very last shot or the very last screen of the movie says that, McNamara, after having done all of these horrible things during the Vietnam War, in fact, the Vietnam War was a war of genocide. We have to emphasize that it was a war of genocide. They literally had a body count where they were counting how many bodies they could kill. The Phoenix program, they were killing 10,000 civilians every single month. This was a USAID funded program. This is USAID doing this, called Chords. I mean, they were killing, or in their words, neutralizing 10,000 civilians every single month. And this was just one minor, small sub-program of the entire genocidal project that was the Vietnam War. So the Vietnam War was genocidal in its conception and its impact. And McNamara, having, steered and, designed this entire project, which is this is why he's always saying, bring me metrics, because he's really talking about how many people are we killing off every single day. They were looking for that crossover point where they would kill them off faster than they could actually replicate themselves. So inside this framework, at the end of the film, there's a kind of redemption story that's built into this. And this is how Western propaganda works, is that, we may have done all of these terrible things, but we're reflective and we've, come to grips with our own, moral compunctions and, moral calculations. And now we're doing the right thing. And so, the last shot of that movie is Robert McNamara moved and went to the IMF, right? And people who don't understand that think that, he did poverty alleviation and he, made good at the end of his life after, realizing what an idiot he was. That's not true. The IMF is the economic equivalent of the Vietnam War. It wages economic war against countries. It's economic genocide. And so, this is the thing that you have to watch out with, even with well-constructed, American documentaries. There's always the ideology. There's always the propaganda. They always throw that in there. So be very, very careful. Watch that film. It's worth watching, but watch it with a jaundiced and critical eye.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, like, correct me if I'm wrong. He had a nervous breakdown during that war, right? I mean, like, from my understanding, LBJ, John F. Kennedy was talking about pulling out, and LBJ came in and was like, "We're not pulling out." He calls McNamara on the phone. He's like screaming at him, like, "We're getting back in this war," and all this other stuff. LBJ apparently was salty in language. And LBJ had made the decision that we're going to go in. And then Nixon made the choice that I have a secret way to win the war, which is just indiscriminate bombing in territories that are not even, the pilots didn't even know where they were. No, it's grotesque. I agree with you. It's grotesque. It was a grotesque war. Nor have we changed our behavior going forward from that war.
Well, at one point, somebody pushed McNamara into the water. People were so outraged, a little bit like the outrage that we're seeing right now, over the genocide in Gaza. But we just recently saw that image of that young Palestinian girl trying to climb out of the flames. Her entire house has been set on fire, and she's trying to climb out of the flames. We saw these kinds of image in Vietnam daily, which is, the constant napalming. There's even that, famous picture of that young girl after, naked, after having all her, clothes burned off from napalm. People don't realize, napalm is not simply a bomb. That thing burns at
it's like jelly or something that connects to the skin that burns. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? It's some kind of jelly stuff. Yeah.
It's an incendiary that's designed to stick and burn at the same time. And it's unextinguishable. You put it into water, it won't go out. So if you've got napalm on your body and it's burning, if you stick it underwater, it will continue to burn. And as soon as you take your hand out, it will burn. It will burn down into the marrow. And you talk about, if you talk to people who've suffered napalm burns and and been treated, they say it is the worst pain on the planet. It's it's like it burns at the temperature at which metals vaporize. People don't understand. It's like being taken near the vicinity of the sun. So it's such an extraordinary, vile, evil substance that was created, and it was originally used during World War II. That's the image. Yeah, that's the image, right?
And by the way, this is not her home. This is her school.
Even worse, right?
Yeah, they bombed the school. They actually burned kids alive.
Yes. So So this is what a genocidal war looks like, and we have to face it squarely in the eye, and then ask ourselves, what can we do about it, and what are we doing about it? This is the moral question of our era, of our moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Just one more point. Napalm was used during World War II. They used it to, burn down Japanese cities, and it had an effect which was as devastating as nuclear bombs, in terms of sheer death toll. And then the U.S. decided to use it in Korea. So Korea is really the place where napalm was used nonstop. It was they literally turned the entire north of the country into a large barbecue pit. So what you see in Gaza right now is what the United States did to the entire territory of North Korea. It's an area that's about 1,200 times the size of northern Gaza, was turned into Gaza. So what we're seeing right now is simply a repetition of a constant pattern that the U.S. has waged. It's the way that the imperial powers wage war. They're always the genocidal wars. But a little piece, I think, a factoid, which I think is worth lifting up, is who invented napalm? Where was it invented?
I don't remember. I should know this. I remember being encountering this information, but it didn't stick.
Harvard Medical School. It was invented at Harvard Medical School, and they did like a big demonstration of its effects, on the Harvard football, field. So that is Harvard's great contribution to science. It's the richest school on the planet. Its endowment was 50 billion larger than certain countries, and at the same time, its main contribution to quote unquote science is the invention of napalm. In Korea, there was so much napalm sprayed. As I said, the country was turned into a huge barbecue pit. And, it's so extensive. Chairman Mao sent his own son to fight in the Korean War, something that you will never hear about, and you'll never see an equivalent thing happen in the United States. But he sent his own son. This was the only son that he had who was actually really functioning, because his other sons were so deeply traumatized. They'd been kidnapped earlier during the Civil War. And then his wife had been kidnapped during the Civil War, the Chinese Civil War, by a KMT warlord. And this man had asked Chairman Mao's wife to denounce him, and she refused. And so he executed her in front of the children. And the children were, completely and permanently traumatized. And so the only one who was really, high functioning was his eldest son. And that son went and fought in Korea. And he was hit with a napalm strike. And that tells you how, how ubiquitous, how they were blanketing the entire country in napalm, because he was still Chairman Mao's son, so they sent him to a relatively what they thought was a less engaged area of combat, and he was struck with napalm, and they had to recover his body. They identified his body from the molten shards of his Russian watch.
Jesus Christ. KJ, that is dark. That is dark. Yeah, that's dark.
Well, I think what it tells us, and this is the important thing, one of the important things to remember is imperial wars are genocidal. They're genocidal in intent and execution. And also, countries will fight back. You have to understand, if Chairman Mao was willing to sacrifice his own son to fight the United States, which was the most powerful country at the time, and send 3 million Chinese underfed, under-equipped soldiers who didn't even have coats at the time. They were fighting in the North Korean winter. Some of them didn't even have coats. Most of them were wearing canvas sneakers, and only 1 out of 3 of them had a weapon. And if you see them fighting, like in the Battle of Shanganglin, Triangle Hill, you see them throwing rocks, but beat the United States. And that is, that's a war that happened, 70 plus years ago. So if the US cannot beat China under those conditions, and if the Chinese leadership is willing to sacrifice their children for that, the United States has to rethink what it's getting into as it escalates to war right now against China.
Speaking of that, I'm glad you mentioned that. This came out of RT. U.S. confirms presence of 500 military personnel in Taiwan. Analysts say China's red line is being pushed. I think I responded to the saying China's red line has been crossed. This is a nose under the camel's tent. And, as I point out about the Ukraine conflict, the reason why Russia points out if Germany fires a Taurus missile, or, well, it would have to be Germany, right? Because it requires German hands in order to fire that missile. If Germany fires a Taurus missile into Russia, they will be targeted. They're fair game. If Europe puts troops into Ukraine, they will be targeted immediately. They're fair game. They have to be targeted, because if you allow them in, then you've set the precedent for more to come in without the reaction by Russia. Meaning, if there are 1,000 now, there'll be 20,000 in 2 weeks. If you allow one missile to hit your country without responding, then you've allowed 10 missiles to hit your country because they don't think you're going to respond. Isn't that the same thing with Taiwan right now with China, now that the US confirms it? It's one thing if China knows it, but it goes unacknowledged. Like Russia knew that the US was involved in firing, helping with the targeting and everything else. They didn't say anything, because the moment that you say something, you're stuck with that knowledge as a government and have to respond to it. Okay, well, the US is now acknowledging, yes, we have 500 military personnel in Taiwan. Yes, we've been selling them weapons hand over fist. And Joe Biden went so far as to say, yes, we will militarily defend Taiwan, whatever the hell that means. Doesn't China have to respond to this? Or do they respond to this?
I think they do have to respond to it, because it is so in your face. I mean, just to give you the analogy, it's like it's one thing let's say in a relationship, it's one thing for a person to be cheating in the relationship. And it's another thing for the person to be cheating and then to flaunt that knowledge to the other person. That's a deal breaker, right? I mean, you can pretend that it's not happening or make justifications, but once you say, I am cheating, that is a very, very strong message. The U.S. is cheating. It's violating the three communiques. The three communiques, one of the conditions of the three communiques is that the U.S. remove all troops. And that was the original agreement. The three communiques between China and the United States, these were the agreements that created the foundation of U.S.-China relations. This is why the United States and China were able to normalize their relations. But those were based on the idea that you do not F with us over time. That is a red line. That is that's the end of the story. And the U.S. is doing this constantly. In 2022, in December, Congress passed a legislation called the Taiwan Enhanced Resiliency Act, TERA. And in time you have this language, Enhanced Resiliency Act, essentially means these are war preparations. And they've been replicated, all over the first island chain and all over the Pacific. So these are all war preparations. And the Taiwan Enhanced Resiliency Act writes into its legislation the demand for the United States to have a permanent rotational presence on Taiwan Island. Permanent rotational presence is military jargon for military base. Okay, that is about as in your face as you can put it. And they put it in writing, black and white, into law. It would be like China writing in their legislation that the People's Liberation Army has to have a permanent rotational presence on Martha's Vineyard, on Galveston Island. That is such an in-your-face provocation. And the Congress passed that, and now they're mandated to do that. So they're having this 500 troops. That's not trivial. And we know that some of them are special warfare forces based on Jinmen Island, 3 kilometers away from the Chinese mainland. That is, that's a swimming distance. That's sniper distance. U.S. has placed the tripwire so close to China's nose. It's saying you're not even going to get out of the end zone. That is how aggressive and militant the U.S. is. So this is madness. They're also planning. They're sowing the entire first island chain with dragon's teeth, namely dual use weapons such as Haiphong and Tomahawk missiles.
Right.
All of these are missiles. All of these missiles are dual use nuclear weapons. That is, they can be modified or can carry nuclear weapons. And if you read, the Atlantic Council and every other, policy paper, they're saying we are going to simply, the continuum between conventional and nuclear, it doesn't exist anymore. We're going to use nukes as if they were candy. That's the current mindset. In Korea, when they do these, military exercises, nuclear warfare is part of the training now, not simply strategic nuclear, bombing runs, which they're doing, every other, month, but also how to fight inside the nuclear environment.
See, that's why I used to ask you the question: how does a country that believes in win-win relationships deal with a country of zero sum? We don't play Go, we play chess. I keep telling you, and I know you already know that, so I don't mean I keep telling you, but this is par for the course. And I guess my question becomes: what does China? Russia showed how it responded. It invaded Ukraine. And it's certainly like, we're not fucking around. You're not going to do this. You're not getting up a platform. And when Putin talks about it, he talks about regretting how late he got involved, not how early he got involved. People keep thinking Putin is this God man, autocrat, strong man. There are people who are more hardcore than him. He invaded because he needed to ensure the integrity of his country. It seems like China is either going to have to let Taiwan go or get involved in some way. And I guess my question is, I know China doesn't want a war. And so how does it deal with this short of some kind of military action?
Well, it's doing a lot of signaling. It's trying to let the United States know that this is an act of madness, of foolishness. They're improving their missile defense systems, including, looking for technologies in space, because the U.S. is already
Real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
But the U.S. doesn't care about Taiwan any more than it cares about Ukrainians.
Of course.
Meaning, we are willing to sacrifice the Taiwanese if it bogs China down into a war. So the signaling to the U.S. saying this is madness doesn't really matter in the context of the U.S. We don't care if Taiwanese get killed. That's kind of the point.
Yeah. Well, so I think the signaling is that don't think that this is just going to be a local affair. It's not. Yeah. It's not just going to stay on our doorstep. So I think that's some of the signaling that's going on. You can also see some of the signaling that's happening through, Pakistan. The Chinese are capable of joint arms warfare, combined forces joint arms warfare, which is the idea that you connect sensors and radar and AWACS and jet planes and missile batteries. You connect them all, and then you can overcome your adversary's advanced weapons platforms. This is what we saw in the India-Pakistan recent conflict. This is one of the largest dogfights in the history of war since World War II. Over 100 planes were in the air, and they were fighting at beyond visual distance. It is actually the Chinese missile that shot down the French Rafale jet.
Right.
This was the longest recorded air-to-air kill in history. So they're showing that they have some pretty impressive technology available, and the capacity to connect sensors and weapons platforms and the kind of decision speed. All of that is showing that we're capable of doing tremendous things on the battlefield. Is the US getting the message? Hard to say. But what has struck me in all that is how silent the United States is about it. You have a lot of YouTube programs that are making speculative, analyses about what happened. But if you look at the ruling class institutions, the institutions of war, and the attached military journals and the military-industrial, propaganda complex, they are dead silent about what happened. And so that's a strong message. They're thinking about it. That silence is a signal too. So I think the Chinese are doing some strong signaling. Once again, we can think of the Ansar Allah, which is able to, essentially neutralize the U.S. threat in the area. Now, once again, you have to ask yourself, how is it that Ansar Allah is able to target U.S. ships from 1,200 kilometers away? I think there's some evidence that the Chinese are maybe providing intel to Ansar Allah.
They were. The targeting data, from my understanding, it was a Chinese company that was providing them with the intelligence for targeting. I could be wrong, though. I might be misremembering.
Well, this is what the West is alleging, that this is, but this is a private company. But if this is what a private company can do for, and if this is what Pakistan can do with watered down Chinese weapons, what will it actually look like when China actually, puts its shoulder to the wheel? I think it will be, completely different story. So I think there's some signaling going on to the United States. You don't want to get into this battle. You don't want to do this. And the United States, is a little bit, the U.S. has waged wars constantly. It's lost most of them, except for against Panama and Grenada, right? And it's a little bit like, it's like this fighter, who's well past their prime, and they've been sparring with children, like kindergarten children, and beating them up. And then it thinks that it's powerful, and now it's going to get in the ring with a real professional. That's not going to work. But this is literally how they have been training themselves. And in training themselves, they believe that they are invincible, that they are unmatched in warfare and war doctrine. They're incapable of understanding that the Ukraine war has been a complete loss. They're incapable of realizing that if Ansar Allah, can, hold them off, that they don't have a chance against China or any other near peer competitor. And as I said, they're still attached to the grizzly bear fallacy. 6% of the U.S. adult population thinks that it can defeat a grizzly bear with their bare hands. There are even diagrams on how to do this. And some believe they can, subdue a lion, etc. This is the kind of deluded thinking that's going on. So we'll see. Will they get the message? Are they receptive to the signaling? Hard to say, but once again, going back to Vietnam, you see that they were not capable of learning that lesson, right?
Yeah.
It took McNamara decades for him to finally, have a minor, realization. They should have realized that in Dien Bien Phu, when the French, they camped out on this hill called Dien Bien Phu, and they believed that they were invincible, that there was no way that the Vietnamese could, defeat them. And what the Vietnamese did was they brought in cannons that they had disassembled into tiny, tiny components and carried them on bicycles and on their backs. And then near Dien Bien Phu, they reassembled those cannons and blasted the French until they were soiling their culotte, in unseemly ways, and then they left. And that should have been a lesson to the imperialists. You need to get out of here, but they didn't. And the U.S. simply took on the French mantle. They simply continued the French colonial project. They just simply, took it on, just as Trump seems to be taking on everything that the Biden administration has been doing.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I got to be honest. The fighting the bear thing is the funniest thing in the world to me. Every time I hear it, there's something in me that laughs. It's like, yeah, I could take a bear with my bare hands. And to be serious, it's like to be completely serious. That bear,
grizzly bear, not a bear.
A grizzly bear. Yeah,
a grizzly bear. They can grow up to what, 1,500 pounds?
Those things are like 9 feet tall. Those things are huge. That is the funniest thing in the world to me. And then write pamphlets on how to do it. Karate chop here, kick here. The other thing for it is, look, a lot of this stuff is racist. Like when they're looking at, they're just tribal people. The French, of all people, who have lost one military conflict after the next in some of the most humiliating ways. There is a scene where when France gets taken over by the Nazis almost overnight, and they call the Brits up saying, it's all lost. He's like, what do you mean it's all lost? Like, because the Brit at this point is like, what do you mean it's all lost? It just, the fight just started. We've lost. It's done. And they lose constantly. They lost against Russia during the Napoleonic Wars. They lost in Vietnam, where America had to effectively take over the Vietnam War. They lose constantly. And yet they walk around with this air of undeserved bravado that is just astonishing. Macron is getting beat up by his wife. And yet they're still like, yeah, we're going to send men off to war in Russia. Dude, you're a battered husband suffering in silence, like quiet desperation, with everybody knows that you're getting a black eye from your wife. Like they are pathetic. And it's unfortunate that, but this is the way, as I keep telling you, I live here. I mean, you live here too, but I live here. And I know how we think. Provocation is the way we function. And we will salami slice and salami slice and salami slice. And every salami slice, if it's allowed, becomes a norm. They did it in Russia, right? Sure, we're going to have Minsk agreements. Oh, no, now we're going to have Minsk II agreements. Now we're going to overthrow the government of Ukraine. And now we're going to build up the largest military in Europe. Like, all of these things were salami slices that continued to just escalate. Yeah, we're going to expand NATO to the border. Now, like, meaning, if there is not a response, that becomes a norm. And they build from the norm. And then the next escalation becomes a norm. And they build from the norm. And if you respond at any point, they'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're responding to this. Then you get propaganda coming into play, trying to make it look as if they're the aggressor because they are now breaking the norm that we generated a year or two ago that the other person didn't respond to. Like, at a certain point, the other side is forced into action. And I guess my thing is, China can signal all it wants. Those signals are not going to be received. The only thing that's going to be received is action. I have become very cynical about this in the way that we don't seem to take into account anything with the exception of military force. That seems to be the only thing that matters. Yeah, you can put economic pressure on some groups or some people. That may work, but you're dealing with a superpower that is hell-bent on dragging you into a war. What could Russia have done? I have people on the show where they would be like, yeah, it's horrible that Russia invaded. I can't believe they did that. Putin should have found a different solution. And I would ask them, okay, what is that other solution? What is the other solution? You've expanded to their border. You've knocked over a government. Every agreement was a lie. And even when they tried to build the Istanbul agreements, you blew it off. When Putin was out there like a preacher begging for the West to come to new security architecture, they said, you don't get to have a sphere of influence. You don't get to do that. Soviet Union collapsed. You're Nigeria with snow. You don't get that level of respect. So I would ask them, okay, so what is Russia supposed to do? And invariably, they say, I don't know. Then it's like, then why are you giving them shit for taking that step, right? And I guess I feel the same way about China and Taiwan. we don't care about your signals. We don't care about indicating this or giving some kind of, and we don't care about it. It's almost like the wife that complains to her husband. She complains every day. Oh my God, I can't believe you're cheating. Oh my God, you never come home. Oh my God, you never do this. And she does it for 20 years. At what point does the husband care that she's complaining? It's just her complaining. If she leaves, okay, that's different. If she hits him like Macron's wife, that's different. Like, meaning, it's one thing to give indication, but if nobody believes that anything is behind that indication, then the indication doesn't really matter. And I think you would agree with me, China doesn't want a war. China wants to deal with these kind of economic relationships and to build those relationships around the globe and to expand economically in the way that they've been doing, because they know that if nothing changes, this horse is out the barn. We are a dominant economic juggernaut. We have 1.4 million people. We have an industrial base that is ungodly. We don't want to get into a war. But you have the US poking and poking and poking and poking. And at some point, the US is going to either have Taiwan or China's going to have to get involved. And I guess my question becomes, what is that point where China says, okay, fuck this? Like, where is that point? We already have troops in. As you point out, we're putting dragon's teeth that has the capability of nuclear weapons, meaning we are trying to create a buffer zone between China and Taiwan, or China or Taiwan could be a hub of some kind of military attack against China. China knows we're doing it. We're doing it openly, and now we're flaunting troops in Taiwan. What is that red line? Because it doesn't seem like that red line exists, KJ. And I'm not, it sounds like I'm advocating for military action. I'm not trying to do that. I'm looking at this from the position of an analyst that have seen the way the US provokes and provokes and provokes, and that provocation doesn't stop until they get what they want, which is Taiwan, or the other side responds to it. What is that line? What is that red line?
I can't say what that red line is, but I can say that, it's very, very close. It's very touch and go. And, as we know, the US sees Taiwan as the main place where it can provoke China. That's where it's driving into the paint over and over again. Can it draw the foul? Can it, can it get everybody to say, look, this is what China did to us? Now, Taiwan is like Ukraine in many different ways. It's different from Ukraine because Ukraine is a country and Taiwan is actually a province of China. But it's similar to Ukraine in that all invasions of China from the ocean have either taken place from Taiwan Island or from the Korean Peninsula, and usually the two at the same time. Taiwan was actually taken from China in 1895 because the Japanese wanted to use it as a base with which to attack the mainland. So it was created as simply a staging zone, and the U.S. wants to do that again. It wants to turn it into a staging zone again, and China cannot let that happen. It's like, it's the pawn that is on the 8th row. Like, you have to do something about it. You cannot let that, you cannot ignore that because it's such an extraordinary threat. And you're right, from the standpoint of the United States, they don't care what happens to Taiwan. It's a pawn. It's a pawn in a gambit. It's designed to be sacrificed. But for them, it is a powerful tool with which to provoke China to action. So what is China's response, and what is that red line? China is constantly trying to de-escalate the situation. As we've said before, China's playing a different game. The US plays chess, it occupies, and it kills. That's the strategy. Position and kill. China's approach is go. Go, the strategy of go is connect in order to live. And what they're doing is they're connecting right now as we speak with the ASEAN countries, with the Gulf Cooperation Council, with all the countries of the Global South. And the idea is that if we create enough strong, solid relations with all of the Global South, maybe the US will realize that it's up against the entire world, or at least the entire multipolar world, 150 plus countries. Maybe it will rethink its strategy. And the US, in and of itself, by itself, without being an imperial power, can still have a decent life. If Americans had their priorities straight, they could be a rich and a prosperous country like China if they only did what China does, which is to invest in itself, invest in its own country, invest in its people, invest in education, in bringing up, the vast majority of the working class, and creating public wealth rather than private wealth, which is concentrated in the hands of a few, dirtbag, monopolists, right? If we didn't allow that to happen, if we had a different system, then the US would be perfectly capable of having a decent society with a good life, with good conditions, and it wouldn't need to go to war constantly to sustain that. But they don't, but the system is not set up for that, right? It's set up, there is this elite capture, and even as it quibbles amongst itself, the machine is so set on destruction and domination. It doesn't understand equal relations. It doesn't understand listening, communication, connection. All it can conceive of is domination. And because it's so set on domination, then, the question, it's not a rhetorical one, is, what are the other countries to do? How do you disarm the bully? And we know from dealing with bullies is, at a certain point, you have to fight back. So that is really, really the most dangerous thing that's happening right now. Right now, you see, there's an entire bunch of China hawks out of the Center for a New American Security. This was the think tank that was responsible for the Afghan war. They invented the doctrine of war against Afghanistan, and they lost everything. And then they were essentially Biden's administration. This is they had 18 of the top positions in the Biden administration. These are people like Nuland, Eli Ratner, Kurt Campbell, etc. Kurt Campbell founded the Center for a New American Security. These people are the neocons. They're the new generation of neocons. And they call themselves the Center for New American Security because that is a direct reference for the project for a new American century. So these are the neocons. They're the U.S. hegemonists. And Eli Ratner, who was, executive director, vice P of VP of, and also, he was the minder for the Secretary of Defense during the Biden administration. He's just come out with an article in Foreign Affairs, essentially saying that we need to prepare for war. We need to get all our ducks in a row. We need to create an Asian NATO to wage war against China. They never go away. They never go silent. And they're constantly urging and agitating for war. And we know that the backstop, the kind of ace in the hole, is nuclear weapons. That's what they're counting on.
Yeah, but there's no way to win that. If I engage in a war, I want to win it, even if I have one guy left. It's maybe a pyrrhic victory, but it's a big victory. There is no way to win a nuclear war. And this idea that you're going to use tactical nukes and it somehow limits me from using regular nukes is nonsense. A nuclear war is a nuclear war. If you use a nuke, I don't give a shit the tonnage of that nuke. I'm using nukes also. They are insane in the way that they're thinking about it. And maybe the only way to deal with it is to denuclearize the entire world. I don't know how you do that. And no country that, I'm just going to say no country that's a superpower gives up nukes.
Well, I think denuclearizing is definitely the direction in which we should go. And on the way to that, there are a series of steps. There are various treaties that can be implemented. And I think that nuclear powers should do what China is doing, which is make a no first use declaration and have no launch on warning, which is what China does. So
we don't do that.
Hair trigger, right? The Chinese detach their nuclear warheads from their delivery vehicles. They have the absolute minimum. They're probably like 1/10 of the weapons that the United States has. They believe that you should never fight a war because it can never be won and it should never be fought. And you start with, no first use and no launch on warning, no hair trigger. And then from there, you move forward to building the institutions and the trust that would lead to complete and total denuclearization. And then
I'm sorry, it is unfortunate that China is doing that. We are in a hostile world. And God, man, I sound like a warhawk. I don't mean to sound that way. I am seeing what my country is doing in Gaza. I'm seeing what it's doing in Ukraine. I am seeing what it's doing in this agitation to war with China. We're in a hostile world. And I get the sense that Russia's response is correct. And it's not that let me ask you this. I'm in Malaysia right now. I was at the Asiatic Summit. Well, not at the Asiatic Summit, but I was reading the reporting that was coming out of Malaysia because the summit was being held here. Was China able, and I'm sorry to interrupt, I swear to God I am. Was China able to get, one of the complaints that China was having that it wasn't able to get everybody on the same page. Is Japan, and I don't know this, which is why I'm asking you, is Japan part of the Asiatic Summit? Summit.
ASEAN is Southeast Asian nations. They're the 10 nations of Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And they just recently had, they're now 11 because they just had another country join. So ASEAN is getting stronger. ASEAN is built on consensus. It's slow and ponderous, but it's built on win-win relations. And they're trying to get everybody to, come to the table and agree. It's a slow, ponderous process, but it is actually a model of what, a peaceful regional coalition could look like. So that I think that is definitely, very optimistic. And of course, ASEAN came together with the Gulf Cooperation Council, the countries, Saudi Arabia and the countries of West Asia. So that is becoming a powerful coalition. And there are all kinds of, strategic and economic deals that are right now being, inked out. So that is very powerful. And it's part, once again, as I said, China connects. The US bombs, China builds, and in particular, it builds relationships. It is connecting in order to live. That's what China is doing. And it's helping the entire, global South live, develop, grow. And it's that strategy that China is banking on. But it's a long, slow, difficult strategy. And as you point out, it is dangerous because you have the bully who is in a school shooter mode, and they're going to build the Golden Dome, which is another way of saying that they've strapped on, body armor. And so that's very dangerous. So what do you do? How do you deal with that? That is really the, $50,000, $64,000 question. And when you talk about, nobody wins a nuclear war, right? We all die. The scary thing is that, the ruling neocons, they either believe that they won't die because they're fundamentalist Christians who believe they will be raptured, which is, that has to be the biggest conflict of interest on the planet, right?
Right.
You don't just have your finger on the nuclear trigger if you believe that, if your religion tells you that ending the world is a good thing. That's a conflict of interest that should not be allowed. Or, some of them, Jamal, I'm convinced are already dead. If I look at Peter Thiel, he looks like, the corpse of Roy Cohn warmed over, it's death warmed over, So they don't care if they'll die because, they're already dead, right? Inside, certainly they're dead.
KJ, man, this has been an illuminating conversation as always. I really appreciate these conversations, man. And the audience loves you to death. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. I'm sorry about the interrupting. It's just, there's an optimism in this notion of countries and people working together that I want, right? I think we don't need a hostile world. if we are honest and straight with each other, and if we have a just world, we can have a decent planet. The moment that somebody doesn't believe that, oh, we're in a world of shit and piss at that point. Like it just makes the world so much more hostile, even if there's one hostile actor. And unfortunately, it's my government that has been setting fires around the globe under this notion of maintaining primacy. And it's unfortunate. I don't know. There's a guilt associated with it. I don't even know how the world deals with it. We'll see. Thank you for this, man. I always appreciate you joining me.
Jamal, I would say it's not guilt. I would say it's moral injury. Moral injury is when you are damaged because what your country or your leadership is doing is morally injurious. And it's not because you are guilty, but it's because you are morally strong and you have strong ethics that you feel hurt and impacted by this. And I think that's something that we should build on, connect to, and understand that that's a signal to us that we need to take even stronger action for peace, for justice, and that despair is not an option.
My tax money goes to Israel to do that. The 500 troops that are being paid by the U.S. government, part of my tax money, whatever percentage it is, goes to that. I mean, well, to be fair, I don't even know if that's true, right? Because we just print money out of thin air. So who the hell knows?
But if you live in Malaysia, you will be paying Malaysian taxes.
I don't live here. I'm just here for 3 months. Yeah,
right.
I'm just here for 3 months. I had to go through. I went through Albania, China, and now I'm in Malaysia. I was in China only for a few hours, but I do want to visit. I do want to visit if I get the opportunity and the cost is right. KJ, man, I always appreciate these conversations. I really do. And they tend to, some part go philosophical, some part military. They tend to hit a few points. The audience seems to love it. I love it. I hope it's not badgering you when I'm having these conversations. But KJ, no, he's a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia-Pacific region. He's a contributor to the book, Capitalism on a Ventilator. It was once censored by Amazon, but you can find it at iacenter.org. You can also find him on the China Report on Breakthrough News Network, a fantastic network. KJ, by the way, when is your next report coming out?
Yes, we just put it out yesterday at 7 p.m. And it's AI grift or AI war. It's analysis of what's going on in the AI world, in particular related to global war against China.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, my man. You be safe. Have a good one, okay?
Thank you.
All right. We have once again, Jesus Christ, I kept him for 28 minutes over. Oh, I'm sorry, KJ. I'm sorry. When I get to the end of the show, look, over the course of the show, I'm paying attention to the clock because I know I have guests coming on. And so I'm deeply watching that clock. And so as I get to a particular point, I'm like, okay, I need to transition to the next guest. When we get to the last guest, oftentimes I'm having a conversation and I just miss the fact that the person is over. I'm sorry, KJ. I'm sorry, KJ. Janice Anderson, let me go through the chats. Cedar can win debates with libertarians, but he cannot win debates with anyone who's actually on the left. On the rare occasion he tries, he fails miserably. Janice, I agree with you up to a point. Like I told you, Tim Black got humiliated when he was having a conversation with Sam Cedar. Jimmy Dore got humiliated when he had the conversation with Sam Cedar. I would imagine there are some people who are better debaters. Fair enough. And he probably had trouble with those people. Sir Mike Salat, daily, I love that name. Watch Joe Rogan interview with Trump. Trump is hypnotizing everyone by going on and 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 on. Yes, I don't know why they're hypnotizing him. He says insane things. He hit upon something that was good, even though at this point, I think he was just lying about it. I want to end the wars. I want to end the wars. Okay, I want to lose 20 pounds. Okay. I want to eat less salt. I want to lift weights. I want to be able to run 20 miles. Yeah, there's all sorts of shit I want to do. I don't do it. I don't run 20 miles. I'm not losing 20 pounds, not usually. I mean, if I'm somewhere and I can't eat, fair enough. I guess my point is you wanting to do something secondary to whether you know how to do it. Those are two very different things, or whether you even have the political will to do it. Those are two very different things. Even if I may accept, I want to end the war. Okay, but you've lost the war. And you can't end it on terms that you yourself want, considering you lost. Losers don't get to dictate terms. The notion that I get beat up by somebody who I provoked a fight with, and I'm on the ground screaming about the terms that I want to end the fight. Okay, that's nonsense. It's nonsense. So, yes, I agree with you. But a lot of the stuff you're saying ended up being fake. And cultists and MAGA still don't accept the fact that they were lied to. Or don't care. They just love their dear leader. Alexander G. Yemen are making their hypersonic cruise missiles while the United States is still trying to figure out this tech. So it is hypersonic, but it's hypersonic because it's coming down at hypersonic speeds. I don't know if it's flying at hypersonic speeds when it's first let out, if that makes sense. Like the arc always seems to be coming down, screaming out of the sky. It is also a question, how the hell did they get that tech? How the hell did they get that tech? How did they get that military sophisticated? Oh, that is a fascinating question. How are they targeting? Whoever they're targeting. I mean, they're hitting these targets from like 1,000 kilometers. Extra medium, KJ is awesome. Agreed, extra medium. Frank Frio, Jamal, this is too far. Women. Jamal, this is for your channel and for the work you do. The world needs real journalists like you. Oh, thank you, Frank. I don't know if I'm a journalist, but I do try to comment. I do try to give news. Newsman, I accept that. Alexander G. Apparently, YouTube censorship doesn't allow opposing genocide against Europeans. It does not. Yeah, it does not. And I know that because when I title a video too aggressively, my video gets demonetized. They'll do this in a heartbeat. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. I tried to put Sarah Bill's interview up, and look, I'm aggressive in my naming when I name videos because I figure you call it what it is, not sugarcoat it. And so I would say something like Israel burns child alive. And they're like, hey, we don't think that's advertiser friendly. Okay, fuck it. I need to change it to something else. Like, yeah, they don't like you saying certain things. And they would hit your video with the demonetization if it says certain things. Even these videos, these morning shows often get demonetized. And they don't give a good rationale for it. They just said this is not advertiser friendly. And so when you give, you are giving to support the content in real terms, even though many of them do get monetized. Many of them do not. I want to thank all of you. This video has gone long. I still have a lot of work to do tonight because all of these videos need to be cut. I appreciate all of you. And I thank all of you for joining me and sticking with me. I'm going to keep the show going. And we keep going till the wheels fall off. You guys have a fantastic day. I will see you all bright and early in the morning. Jamal Thomas Morning Show, episode 163. We have been in this sacred space for 163 times. And tomorrow will be 164. And I have another damn good show for you tomorrow. Have a good one all. Signing off. Thank you all. Be safe.